Chapter 994. The reason why he spent so much effort to nag in front of Wuxiong was to get Wuxiong to agree, but the most important reason was to gain Wuxiong's support. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Wuxiong had been the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace for so many years. It was impossible that he didn't have any power in the netherworld that he could borrow. If that was the case, then Wuxiong wouldn't have held this position for so many years. It could also be described as incompetent. How could the Immortal Emperor let an incompetent person be the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace? Father-in-law, have a safe trip. I won't see you off. Wuxiong cupped his fists and bowed slightly. He watched Mu Bing leave with a sneer on his face. With his intelligence, how could he not know that Mu Bing wanted to borrow his power? Since Mu Bing was in such a hurry, he would fulfill his wish. In any case, he only gave some verbal help and didn't show any evidence. As for the Onyx army, if anything happened, he wouldn't be implicated. Moreover, judging from Mu Bing's words and actions just now, it was obvious that he was prepared. Perhaps he could really kill Yu Qianqiu. However, what Wuxiong didn't know was that in the world of Yu Qianqiu's previous life, there was an idiom called armchair strategists. When one had nothing to do, one could boast and speak eloquently. However, when it came to real action, it was far from the case. If Mu Tianjiao had been present just now, she would have desperately tried to stop her father from doing that because she knew her father too well. How could she not know what her father was capable of? She never thought that her father could be a match for Yu Qianqiu, so she repeatedly advised him not to provoke Yu Qianqiu, but Wuxiong wasn't a fool. He let Mu Bing do whatever he wanted because he had other intentions. The real reason was that Mu Bing had just said something about Mu Tianjiao and Yu Qianqiu. Regardless of how Yu Qianqiu was, Wuxiong could see that this father-in-law of his could even insult the reputation of his only daughter, let alone him, his son-in-law. One could imagine what he wouldn't do in the future. At this rate, he would be implicated sooner or later. Then let him kill Yu Qianqiu. It would be best if they could kill Yu Qianqiu. If Mu Tianjiao really had a Yu Qianqiu in her heart, it would cut off Mu Tianjiao's yearning. For someone who loved her, it was a good thing. At the same time, Mu Tianjiao would surely hate her father because of this. Then he could justifiably distance himself from Mu Bing, so as not to implicate himself in the future, and not to cause a rift between him and Mu Tianjiao. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. If Mu Bing failed to kill Yu Qianqiu and was killed by Yu Qianqiu instead, it would be a good thing for him. Now that Mu Bing was dead, this inconvenient burden was completely gone. Naturally, Mu Tianjiao would also completely cut off her thoughts of Yu Qianqiu. One could imagine how she would treat the person who killed her father. Similarly, it was killing two birds with one stone. In short, no matter who died, it would be a good thing for him, so Wuxiong was naturally happy to do it. Poor Mu Bing. Little did he know that this little trick of his was not even worth mentioning in the eyes of some people. He was just digging a pit that would harm others and himself. Whether or not he could harm others was another matter, but he was definitely going to harm himself. On the rapidly flying shuttle, Yu Qianqiu sat at the back of the shuttle with his legs crossed. He leaned on the side of the shuttle with one hand supporting his head and looked at the scenery. It had already been 2 days. Chen Yun Xan, who was silently standing at the front of the flying shuttle, had his back facing him. The two of them had almost never communicated. Only Yu Qianqiu would tease him from time to time. Unfortunately, the other party simply ignored him. Drowsily, Yu Qianqiu felt the red light piercing his eyes. He opened his eyes slightly and saw that it was another rising sun. It was the 4th day since he left the psychedelic immortal city. In front of him, Chen Yun Xian's imposing figure blocked most of the piercing sunlight. Yu Qianqiu could not help but sigh at his foresight. Fortunately, he was not the one driving the flying shuttle. Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, the front end of the flying shuttle suddenly pressed down and slammed diagonally towards the ground. With the back of the shuttle tilted up, Yu Qianqiu grabbed the sides of the flying shuttle. He could see the ground getting closer and closer to him. He immediately cried out in alarm, "What are you trying to do, Chen Yun Xan?" Like a nail, Chen Yun Xan, who was standing firmly at the front of the flying shuttle, descended against the wind. He looked back and snorted coldly, "Cowardly rat." Then the flying shuttle abruptly returned to normal and flew almost close to the ground. Finally, it slowly stopped in front of a magnificent palace built against a mountain. Bang! The moment the flying shuttle landed on the ground, Chen Yun Xan had already floated out and landed lightly on the steps of the palace's entrance. Yu Qianqiu dashed out as if he was running for his life. Then he took the flying shuttle in his hand and checked it. After confirming that it was not damaged, he put it away. Just as he was about to scold Chen Yun Xan, he saw two golden-robed guards at the entrance of the palace. He immediately looked around and found that it was the entrance to the netherworld that everyone had mentioned. Only then did he know why Chen Yun Xian had stopped. Damn it! Why didn't you say anything? Yu Qianzhou cursed under his breath. In his heart he was also amazed at the vastness of the immortal world. With Chen Yun Xian's cultivation, it took him more than 3 days to fly from the psychedelic immortal city to here. If it was him who knew how many days it would take to fly. This was the difference in cultivation. After looking around, he swayed towards a small hill on the side. Just as he reached the top of the hill, he heard Chen Yun Xian's voice behind him. Where are you going now? Tepi. Yu Qianzhou turned back and roared. Just as he lifted his robe, he found that there was a call in front of him that seemed to be more hidden. He turned back and roared again, don't peek. Chen Yun Xian's face immediately darkened. He had no intention of peeking at all. After turning into the call, Yu Qianzhou looked around. After confirming that there was no one, he took out a silver ball and pressed it into the mountain wall. This was mainly to shorten the time it would take to reach the entrance to the netherworld. Then he lifted up his long robe and fired a shot to deceive others. After tying his belt, he swayed back to the entrance of the palace. Chen Yun Xian looked at him coldly and sneered, why don't you take a dump again? Yu Qianzhou shrugged disapprovingly, this thing doesn't care about travel together. The place I just went is very hidden. If you want to take me there, I'll wait for you. Chen Yun Xian's lips moved, but he forcefully held back and did not say anything. He realized that he was not a match for Yu Qianzhou in a quarrel. The main thing was that he was not as shameless as Yu Qianzhou. The two golden-robed guards looked at each other. They had never heard anyone talk about taking a dump here. It was simply unbearable. One of them immediately shouted, this is the entrance to the netherworld. Those with the token can enter. Those without the token are not allowed to make a ruckus here. Leave quickly. Yu Qianzhou immediately took out his netherworld passage token and waved it in front of the ash cloud messenger in a threatening manner. It was as if he was saying, did you hear that? Those without the token are not allowed to make a ruckus here. I can make a ruckus with the token. If you don't have it, you better shut up obediently. Chen Yun Xian's face darkened again. Although their heartless palace had the netherworld token, it had always been used by groups. They would rarely give it to a single person unless there was something important. He immediately said in a deep voice, if you want to go in alone without me, this old man will be more than happy to do so. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and snorted coldly as if saying, in your dreams. Then he walked up to the guards and handed over the token for them to check. After confirming it, the guards let the two of them in. The two of them walked in one after the other. There was nothing in the hall. The four walls were chiseled with knives and axes, and there was only a long tunnel. The tunnel was abnormally dark and it was frighteningly quiet. Only the sound of their footsteps could be heard. At the end of the tunnel, there was a ball of black light spinning tirelessly. It was unknown how many years it had been spinning here. You go in first. Yu Qianzhou moved to the side. After all, he had never been to the netherworld, so he was more or less unsure. Chen Yun Xian snorted coldly and disappeared into the spinning black light in a flash. Yu Qianzhou hesitated for a long time, but he finally plucked up his courage and jumped in. The moment he entered the spinning black light, colorful flowing lights appeared in front of him. An unknown gravitational force sucked him in, and when there was a flash of light, he was spat out. The sky was dark and there was no light from the sun or the moon. It was like the moment when twilight was about to turn into night. This was the first thing that Yu Qianzhou felt when he landed and saw this world. However, before he could see anything else, Yu Qianzhou, Chen Yun Xian's angry roar rang out. Yu Qianzhou looked over and saw over a dozen black-armored, knife-wielding soldiers surrounding Grey Cloud Xian. Grey Cloud Xian was looking at Yu Qianzhou as if he wanted to swallow him alive. Damn it! Could it be that the netherworld was in such chaos? It really lived up to its reputation. Before he could figure out what was going on, a stocky armored general appeared in front of him. He held a large blade that looked like a green dragon crescent moon blade and shouted, "Incomer, show me your token of passage to the netherworld." Yu Qianzhou glanced at the besieged Songyun Xian and cautiously took out his netherworld passage medallion. While the other side was checking the medallion, Yu Qianzhou pointed at Songyun Xian and carefully asked, "General, what crime did he commit?" After the armored general verified that there was nothing wrong with the token, he returned it to Yu Qianzhou and asked, "He's with you?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes flickered. He could not figure out the situation, nor did he know what kind of crime Chen Yun Xian had committed. If he was with him, would he be implicated? As soon as he hesitated, Chen Yun Xan panicked and roared, "Yu Qianqiu, what do you think you're doing?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the situation around him. There weren't many people here, so he guessed that these people might not be a match for Chen Yun Xan. He replied weakly, "He's with me. Is there a problem?" The armored general immediately rolled his eyes and snapped, "No problem, all of you scram." The dozen or so saber-wielding soldiers surrounding Grey Cloud Xn also flashed back. Yu Qianqiu walked up to Grey Cloud Xn, who was glaring at him with fire in his eyes, and asked suspiciously, "What did you do? You made such a big fuss and almost implicated me. Do you really not know?" Chen Yun Xian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. "I just came in. How would I know what you did?" Yu Qianqiu was confused. He did not know that after he let Chen Yun Xian come in first, he had been too careful and hesitated a little too long at the entrance to the immortal world. As soon as Chen Yun Xian arrived in the netherworld, the guards naturally wanted to see his netherworld token, but he did not have it. He could only say that the token was with the person behind him and would come in soon. But what made him panic was that after waiting for a long time, Yu Qianqiu still didn't come in. He immediately suspected that he had been tricked by Yu Qianqiu. The guards waited for a long time and did not see anyone come in. They naturally suspected that he was a trespasser and immediately surrounded him. Fortunately, the guards realized that Chen Yun Xian's cultivation was very high. It was probably not something they could handle, so they didn't make a move. Otherwise they would have captured Chen Yun Xian first. It was also at this critical moment that the late Yu Qianqiu finally came. This was what happened. Chen Yun Xian saw that he did not look like he was lying. After a bit of analysis, he felt that he was not lying. If he really wanted to harm him, he would not have come in. Even if he came in, he could have denied not knowing him and caused a conflict between him and the guards. He paused and said, "This should be your first time in the netherworld, right?" Yu Qianqiu's brain was still somewhat good. After hearing his question and looking at the guards at the entrance, he pondered for a bit and understood what was going on. However, he did not regret not taking the opportunity to trick Chen Yun Xian, because it was useless now. With Chen Yun Xian's ability, if he was forced into a corner, he could easily escape back to the immortal world. The exit was right in front of him, and the guards here should not be able to stop him. Yu Qianqiu replied with a non-committal "N," indicating that it was indeed his first time in the netherworld. Then he began to look around. A huge stone tablet at the side, diagonally facing the exit of the netherworld, attracted his attention. Anyone who entered the netherworld from the immortal world would probably be able to see the inscription on it. The vast netherworld, a world of its own. Birth, old age, sickness and death. The ultimate place, the netherworld. 20 large, blood-red words were forcefully engraved on the huge black stone tablet. The words exuded an ancient aura, making people have the urge to kneel and worship them. Yu Qianqiu's gaze turned towards the endless darkness. This place was not completely dark. There was a hint of a green haze to it. It felt like there was some light, but he couldn't tell where the light was. It was like the moment when dusk turned to night or when the night was about to break. Everything was hazy. The guards at the entrance of the netherworld looked at the two fellows who were unwilling to leave. From time to time they would look at their leader, who was the guy who had just checked Yu Qianqiu's pass. Logically speaking, at this time the leader should have shouted, "Since you have the pass, you are not allowed to stay. Leave immediately." But the strange thing was that the leader looked to the side with his hands behind his back, as if he had not seen anything. Chapter 995. This was called smart people doing smart things or being perceptive. At first, the armored general only realized that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. Later, when Yu Qianqiu came in, he didn't pay much attention at first, because Yu Qianqiu's weak response made him look down on him a little. However, when he realized that he also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he was shocked. Why did two immortal emperor-level experts come from the immortal world all of a sudden? The underworld's cultivation was divided into 4 levels. Underworld Knight, Underworld Sage, Underworld Venerable and Underworld Emperor, corresponding to the immortal world's minor immortal, exalted immortal, great immortal and immortal emperor levels. The armored general's cultivation wasn't low, otherwise he wouldn't have been sent to guard the underworld's entrance. After all, he was a late-stage underworld venerable, equivalent to a late-stage great immortal. However, since he couldn't see through their cultivation, these two were at least early-stage immortal emperor experts. The reason he was shocked wasn't because he was afraid of Yu Qianqiu Xian, but from Yu Qianqiu Xian's actions at the beginning, he was clearly wary of the underworld. However, the guy who came later was different. His cultivation was so high, why did he pretend to be weak? Based on his many years of experience, People who pretended to be weak were often the easiest to ignore, and often the scariest. So, seeing that the two didn't leave, he didn't dare to say anything. If he angered them, he wouldn't be able to handle it. Anyway, they came in with a token and didn't break any rules. So, he turned around and pretended he didn't see anything, displaying the style of an old fox who was good to everyone. So this is the underworld. Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. It was more or less different from what he imagined. He looked around and didn't know where to go. What do you want to do in the underworld? Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and thought that it was a good idea to keep an expert by his side. After all, he knew nothing about the netherworld and was not in a hurry to get rid of him. He shook his head and sighed, I dare not disobey the Celestial Emperor's decree. Oh right, your heartless palace should have people doing business in the netherworld, right? Yes. Seeing that his tone had suddenly become gentle, Sangyun Xn recalled Meihe's words before he came, and immediately became vigilant. What do you want? We can't run around aimlessly. Naturally, he had to gather some information first. As the chief high priest of Heartless Palace, you should be able to contact them, right? Yu Qianqiu asked seriously. In fact, his purpose was very simple. He came here to find Bai Changchun. To be more precise, he wanted to know whether Bai Changchun was dead or alive. Otherwise, he would feel very uncomfortable worrying about him every day. It was said that Bai Changchun had fought with the Emperor of the Underworld and fled into the boundless and mysterious land of darkness after his defeat. They had to find out which direction Bai Changchun had fled to. Otherwise, how would they find him? The guards at the entrance of the underworld shivered slightly, especially the armored general. He thought to himself, no wonder both of their cultivations are so high. One is here on the decree of the immortal emperor, the other is the chief high priest of the number one sect in the immortal world. But why did they come to the underworld? What do you want to find out? Sangyun Xian asked suspiciously. Nothing much. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. I just want to know the general situation of the underworld so that I can travel around and gain experience. Only with enough experience can I compose a good song. He wanted to say that he wanted to find Bai Changchun, but he couldn't say it out loud. First of all, it would scare Sangyun Xian, and this was the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld. If he revealed it, wouldn't he be immediately targeted by the Emperor of the Underworld? Sangyun Xn pondered for a moment and didn't want to say anything. However, this was the underworld after all, and it was very chaotic with various hegemons. This was the brat's first time here, so he didn't know anything. If he ran around with this brat and ended up in the lair of some powerful expert, then he would also be out of luck. After a moment of hesitation, he slowly said, "Follow me." Then he took out his own flying shuttle and flashed onto it. Yu Qianqiu immediately flashed onto it as well. This time there was no need to waste his breath on scheming. Sangyun Xian took the initiative to act as a guide and pilot the flying shuttle. Although he wasn't familiar with the underworld, he had been here before. Compared to a rookie like Yu Qianqiu, he was much more familiar with it. He was mainly concerned about his own safety. He was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would take him to some lair. The flying shuttle sped northwest in the darkness. In fact, even Yu Qianqiu couldn't tell if they were going northwest or not. There were no sun, moon, or stars here, so there was no way to tell which direction they were going. However, when they exited the entrance of the underworld, they were facing forward. Then, according to the common sense of up north, down south, left, west, right, east, who knew which direction they were flying in? Yu Qianqiu even suspected that the people of the underworld didn't have any direction at all. Although the speed of the flying shuttle was very fast, it was obviously much slower than when they were flying in the immortal world. Sangyun Xn stood at the front, maintaining a high degree of vigilance. His robe fluttered in the night, making him look extraordinary. In particular, his hands were hidden in his sleeves. Yu Qianqiu didn't doubt that if they encountered any unexpected situation, the hands hidden in his sleeves could pull out the Heartless Palace's three swords drawing technique at any time. It would definitely be earth-shattering. Yu Qianqiu kept looking around. The scenery of the underworld was not just a little worse than the immortal world. The main reason was that there was no scenery to see. Everywhere was dim and gloomy. From time to time he would see streams of light dancing in the air. He didn't know what they were, but it was slightly mysterious. Occasionally he could see the shadow of a huge black shadow flashing by. Judging by the shape, it should be the mountains of the underworld. I say, High Consecrator Sangyun, where are you taking me? Yu Qianqiu had lost count of the number of times he had asked this question. The annoyed ash-gray cloud Xn finally spat out 4 words, Twilight City. Twilight City? Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He felt that he had heard this name before, but he couldn't remember when he heard it. Normally, if he heard such a rare name in the immortal world, he would definitely remember who said it. Could it be an impression from his previous life? In his previous life, the underworld, which was the netherworld, had Twilight City? What kind of place is Twilight City? Is it a city? Why is it called Twilight City? He asked a lot of questions in one breath. Songyun Xan understood that if he didn't answer, this guy would continue to be annoyed. He looked around vigilantly and casually explained, "No one knows why it is called Twilight City, at least I don't know. Maybe someone knew in the past. Anyway, this name has existed for a long time. It is a city and no one knows when it has existed. In short, many things in the underworld are too old to be judged by common sense. It is now a place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld. It is said that when the demon world was not sealed, the cultivators of the three realms would trade here." A place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He searched his mind but had no memory of it. He couldn't help but wonder, since it is a place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld, why have I never heard of it in the immortal world? Songyun Xen sneered, "The rules of the underworld do not allow the people of the underworld to trade with the people of the immortal world. However, there are some things that both sides need, so the underworld palace turns a blind eye to it. However, no one would be stupid enough to openly provoke the underworld palace. If not stupid, then what is? What's more, Twilight City is not a place that ordinary immortal world sects can reach. It's not surprising that you don't know about it. If you don't ask, no one will talk about it." Sure enough, his foundation was shallow. He didn't know how many things he didn't know. Yu Qianqiu fell into silence for a while. Obviously, ordinary immortal world sects couldn't reach it because they would encounter many dangers on the way. With the strength of those small sects, it was indeed difficult to reach it safely. After a pause, he asked, "With your current speed, how long will it take to reach Twilight City from the entrance to the underworld?" "If it goes well, at least half a month," Songyun Xian said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu immediately let out a cold breath. The territory of the underworld was really wide. With Songyun Xian's speed, what kind of concept would it take half a month to fly? And this was under the condition that everything went well. What if it didn't? Just as he thought that things weren't going well, things were about to happen. The shuttle suddenly came to an abrupt stop, the powerful inertia throwing him out. Like a bolt of lightning, Ashiro Yun Xan grabbed his ankle, pulled him back and threw him back into the cabin. Yu Qianqiu was immediately scared and shouted, "What do you want now?" "Shut up," Songyun Xen shouted in a low voice, and his eyes quickly swept around. Yu Qianqiu immediately found that there was something wrong with his expression. He also looked around and found that there was a faint gray fog in the darkness. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it. He immediately asked carefully, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" "We have been in this gray fog for several hours, and we are trapped by the formation." Songyun Xen pointed to the shadowy peaks around them, but when he said this, his expression was unusually calm, and his eyes were full of strong confidence. Suddenly Yu Qianqiu felt a lot more relieved. He suddenly said indifferently to the void, "I don't know which friend is playing a joke here. This Songyun Xian has accidentally disturbed this place. I hope this friend will be magnanimous and let us go. This Songyun Xian will be very grateful." Yu Qianqiu was not afraid. He could go back at any time. While he was looking around curiously, he suddenly heard laughter coming from all directions. He couldn't tell whether it was a man's voice or a woman's voice. It seemed to be far and close, and from time to time, it gave people the feeling that it was lying next to your ear and laughing. It was very strange. Yu Qianqiu hated people who played tricks in front of him the most. He immediately shouted, "Which old bastard dares to play tricks in front of Grandpa? Do you want to die?" Chapter 996. Songyun Xan was speechless. He tilted his head and looked over. You didn't even know whether the enemy was strong or weak, and you already started scolding him. If it was an expert that you couldn't afford to offend, you wouldn't even have the chance to regret it. However, Yu Qianqiu politely followed the routine and ignored him. Yu Qianqiu's strange laughter was suddenly cut off. He couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu again, guessing that he had been scolded to stop. Songyun Xan couldn't help but feel a little depressed. It seemed that this guy was always arrogant and didn't fear anyone, not just him. But if he didn't restrain himself in the netherworld, he would be implicated and killed by this guy sooner or later. "Ignorant junior, how dare you speak such arrogant words? In a moment, this old man will definitely eat you up until not even your bones are left." The ethereal and traceless voice once again sounded from all directions. It seemed to be near yet far, and sometimes it seemed to be right beside one's ear. It's useless to talk nicely to this kind of pretentious person. He's just asking for a scolding. Look, he's exposed. What an old guy. Yu Qianqiu looked around and turned to ask Songyun Xn, with your ability, it shouldn't be a problem to take care of him, right? I didn't even see him, how would I know if there's a problem? Songyun Xin's face twitched. This kind of person was really not on the same level as him. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Yu Qianqiu didn't stand on ceremony. He took a step forward, stepped on the side of the ship, and waved his hand at the night sky, shouting, "Old bastard, I'm warning you, the person next to me is a top expert, Songyun Xn, the chief consecrator of the #1 sect in the celestial world, Heartless Palace. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and give way or he won't be polite to you." He had never seen such a shameless person. Just as Grey Cloud Xn glared at him, the faintly discernible voice laughed and said, "I've heard of the Celestial Realm's Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing, but I've never heard of this or that. But even if the sect master of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, is here, so what? This is the Netherworld, it's not the place for people from the celestial world to be arrogant." Yu Qianqiu immediately pointed around and shook his head at Songyun Xn. "This old thing is obviously looking down on you." In fact, Qingyun Xin had already used his perception to scan the surroundings during this period of time. His eyes flickered as he looked around and said, "I have no enmity with Sir and do not wish to have any conflict with Sir. I hope that Sir will stop here, alright?" Yu Qianqiu's spirit was instantly lifted. He could hear a hint of an ultimatum in his words. It seemed like the show was about to start. "Stop." The faintly discernible voice giggled. "What a joke. I haven't even made a move. You're the ones who barged into my Mirage Mr. Ray. You can't even break out of my Mirage Mr. Ray, so what qualifications do you have to fight with me?" Songyun Xin snorted coldly. Just like Yu Qianqiu, he stepped on the railing with one foot, stared down at Ji Hao and said in a bland tone, "You are hiding in the vast Styx River, so you must be a member of the Styx River water kind. Do you think that I can't do anything to you just because you're hiding in the Netherworld River?" "Styx River?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He quickly craned his neck to look around. He could vaguely see an outline that was as wide as a black belt extending to both ends of the land. He couldn't see the end of it either. This should be the Styx River that Songyun Xin had mentioned. The other party paused. Obviously he was surprised that Songyun Xin could discover his hiding place. Then he giggled and said, "I won't argue with you. We'll talk after you break my Mirage Mr. Ray. If you can't, just wait for death." "Child's play. I'll naturally break it after I kill you." Songyun Xin stared down without turning his head. He said to Yu Qianqiu, "Wait for me here. We'll continue our journey after I get rid of this demon." His words were filled with great confidence in his own strength. Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly. "Do whatever you want. I can take care of myself." Songyun Xin stomped his feet lightly and floated in the air. His cold gaze swept across the land below. With a swoosh, he turned into a blue stream of light and charged down. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly controlled the flying shuttle. He knelt at the bow of the ship and stuck out his butt to look at the commotion below. Just as the stream of light was about to collide with the wide river below, Songyun Xin's shout was suddenly heard. "Absolute heaven." Yu Qianqiu suddenly recalled that Wei Chuanqiu had told him that day. The Passionless Palace's sword-drawing technique had a total of 5 forms. The first form was called Absolute Heaven, the second form was called Absolute Earth, the third form was called Heartless, the fourth form was called 2 Swords as One, and the fifth form was called 3 Swords as One. Songyun Xin had already mastered all 5 forms of the sword-drawing technique. Then this Absolute Heaven should be the first form of the Passionless Palace's sword-drawing technique. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a dazzling light suddenly illuminated the world. Although it was shrouded in a thin layer of fog, the surrounding situation could be seen clearly in an instant. The surging waves of the river reflected the dazzling light. In the sky, the sword ray that was like a heavenly dragon clashed violently with the reflection in the river. Boom! The tranquil night was broken, a huge wave instantly spread out from the wide Netherworld River, rumbling and surging in all directions. The center of the wave exploded into a splash of white water that was hundreds of meters high, charging straight at the flying shuttle above. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. He used the water art and slapped out with his palm. The violent wave of water immediately scattered in all directions, brushing past the flying shuttle and shooting even higher. Water was soft and could dissipate force. To be able to cause such a high wave, It was clear how powerful Cangyun Xian's attack was. Then Yu Qianqiu saw with his own eyes that the Netherworld River, which was nearly a kilometer wide, was almost cut off by Cangyun Xian's sword. He could see the riverbed. Meanwhile, Cangyun Xian's sword-drawing technique did not dissipate. It directly struck a huge mound of soil on the riverbed. Ah! A scream rang out. The Netherworld River, which had been cut off, was instantly submerged together with Cangyun Xian. The dazzling light that was like a flash in the pan suddenly disappeared. There was a throbbing in the surrounding air. Yu Qianqiu looked around vigilantly. He saw that a large area of hazy gray fog was sizzling away and gathering in the Netherworld River below. It was as if there was a huge range hood installed in the Netherworld River. It seemed like the mirage mist array had been broken. Yu Qianqiu immediately clicked his tongue. He thought to himself that Cangyun Xian was indeed an immortal emperor-level expert. He had solved the problem with a single attack. It was clean and efficient. He wondered if Cangyun Xian had killed that demon. As he was pondering, he suddenly heard a soft dong sound behind him. He turned around and saw a large hand quickly grabbing his neck. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He slapped back with his hand almost without hesitation. A group of purple meteors burst out and smashed the hand that was grabbing him into pieces on the spot. The person screamed, but he reacted quickly. The moment his hand was crippled, he teleported hundreds of meters away before the group of flying swords could hit him. He turned around and ran. At that moment, a blue stream of light rushed out of the water with a boom. It shot out diagonally and cut off the person's escape route. It was Cangyun Xian. A thick gray fog suddenly burst out from the figure's body to obscure the eyes and ears of others. In an instant, it wrapped around Gray Cloud Xian and shot out from the gray fog, rushing towards the Netherworld River below. As a bystander, Yu Qianqiu saw everything clearly. He immediately roared angrily, "B****, you dare to sneak attack me? Don't run." The group of purple swords in the air chased after him. He didn't care about anything else. He threw down the flying shuttle and teleported to chase after him. It was more important to kill him first. He didn't know what kind of magical power that the thick gray fog had. It actually trapped Cangyun Xian for a while. After Cangyun Xian rushed out of the fog, he happened to see the flying shuttle in the air lose its momentum and fall. He waved his hand and kept the flying shuttle. His gaze suddenly looked down. Just as the person who was fleeing in panic entered the water, close to 100 purple flying swords shot into the water like cannons. Yu Qianqiu, who was in hot pursuit, shouted angrily, "Trying to run?" As he gave chase, he fiercely sent out a palm strike. The surging Netherworld River below instantly became sparkling and translucent. Cangyun Xian's pupils shrank. He couldn't help but let out a cold breath. Although he had heard of the legend of Yu Qianqiu freezing the life and death mound in illusory immortal city, it wasn't as shocking as seeing it with his own eyes. A river that was close to 1,000 meters wide was instantly frozen. "Great Immortal, please spare me. Great Immortal, please spare me. I know my mistake, I know my mistake." A sorrowful voice came from the glacier below. Yu Qianqiu landed on the ice. He looked down with a sinister gaze. He seemed to be considering whether or not to kill. Cangyun Xian kept the sword in his hand and landed on the ice. He was speechless when he saw the crystal-clear situation below. The frozen person was surrounded by hundreds of purple flying swords. Some of the flying swords even stabbed into his body. If Yu Qianqiu hadn't stopped in time, that person would have been stabbed into a hedgehog. That person was actually depressed. He couldn't understand why the river suddenly froze. He was surrounded by hundreds of flying swords in just a short while. If it was an ordinary flying sword, he would not be afraid. However, he had already experienced these flying swords. Not only were they incomparably sharp, they seemed to be his natural nemesis. His cultivation was like nothing in front of them. Once he got close, he could feel a strong sense of suppression. Without a doubt, they could easily beat him into a cork. He had no way of blocking them. This person is a river clam that has cultivated successfully. His cultivation has reached the early stage of Underworld Venerable. It is equivalent to the early stage Great Immortal in the immortal world. Cangyun Xian said indifferently. He had clearly seen the person's true form in the river. River clam? Early stage Underworld Venerable? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He seemed to understand something. He took a few steps forward. The ice under his feet melted and he quickly sank down. He landed in front of the pitiful man who was trapped and looked him up and down. The man was dark and skinny and he didn't look old. His eyes were filled with fear and his pupils were spinning around. Other than the wounds caused by his flying swords, there were a few long bloody wounds. It was obvious that he was injured by Cangyun Xian. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He shook his sleeve and a small green bead appeared in his hand. He held it between two fingers and sent it to the person's mouth. He shouted, "Swallow it if you don't want to die." Chapter 997. It was already scary enough to be stabbed by so many flying swords. Now he was forced to eat this strange thing. The person looked at the thing beside his mouth and said in fear, What is this?" He could already feel that this pearl had an aura similar to that of the flying swords that could suppress him. If he ate it he would die. "You don't look like you want to eat it?" Yu Qianqiu asked sinisterly. Close to 100 purple flying swords suddenly moved closer by an inch. The person immediately cried out, I'll eat it, I'll eat it." His mouth was wide open. Yu Qianqiu flicked his finger, and the green pearl directly burrowed into the person's throat. The person coughed and looked at him in fear. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "That's right. Don't ever think about forcing him out and don't ever think about escaping. Otherwise you will end up very badly." That bead was not something else, it was condensed from green fire. When Yu Qianqiu heard that the person was so weak despite having an early-stage netherworld venerable cultivation, he knew that part of the reason was that he had already been injured by Grey Cloud Xian, but the most important reason was that his own fire arts could restrain the person. Yu Qianqiu recalled the time when he used fire arts to suppress Ghost General Meng Yan in the Demon Ghost region. The extreme yang flames were the bane of ghosts and spirits, and they were very useful in the netherworld. Thus, he had a sudden idea and condensed a green fire pearl for the person to swallow. If the person was forced out by force or escaped the range of the green fire pearl, then the green fire pearl would immediately explode into a fierce green fire in the person's stomach. It would be strange if this ghost-type netherworld monster did not turn into ashes. Yu Qianqiu's body flashed out of the glacier after he had placed a restriction on the other party. Nearly 100 purple flying swords broke through the ice and flew into his sleeves with a whoosh. Grey Cloud Xian stared at his sleeves for a while, then looked at the person in the ice cave and said, "What did you give him to eat? In any case he's not a good person. If he dares to disobey, I'll make sure he doesn't even have the chance to cry." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. The people in the ice cave shuddered at his words. Suddenly, a sinister laugh was heard from above. "Stop playing dead down there. Get up here." Bang bang. Wah. Rumble. Strange sounds came from both ends of the netherworld river. After the entire glacier trembled, it was finally unable to withstand the scouring of the netherworld river. It broke away from the solidification of the two sides of the river and slowly floated downstream along with the netherworld river. The glacier beneath their feet shook violently from time to time. Dense spiderweb-like cracks had already begun to appear. Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Yunxin stood firmly on top of it, watching the person climbing out of the hole in the ice. After that person carefully looked at the two of them, he realized that he couldn't see through their cultivation at all. It was obvious that they were both stronger than him. His entire face instantly turned bitter, and he silently cursed his bad luck. Previously, when he saw the speed of the two flying shuttles, he estimated that their cultivation should be similar to his. In addition, he saw that they were people from the celestial world and not locals, so he didn't take them seriously. In the end, he suffered such a disaster. Little did he know that Zhang Yunxin was being careful and didn't dare to fly too fast, but there were people who came to seek death. "Thou art of the netherworld river's water tribe. We are flying in the air and have nothing to do with you. Why are you waiting for an opportunity to harm us?" Zhang Yunxin shouted coldly. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at him. He realized that once this fellow came to the netherworld, the way he spoke immediately changed. In the celestial world he was very unscrupulous and arrogant. Here, no matter how ruthless he was, he always had a bit of a diplomatic tone. He was very similar to those people in his previous life, which made people a little uncomfortable. The person said weakly, "I really didn't mean to target you. Before you came, I had already set up the Mirage Mist formation, but you just happened to barge in. Stop your F***king nonsense. The netherworld isn't your home. Do you think it's reasonable for you to rob us here?" That. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose and asked, "River Clam Demon, what's your name?" From their tone, one could tell that the younger one was obviously not a kind person. The person immediately nodded and said, "This lowly one is Shen Yu." "Shen Yu?" Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment. He realized that it was indeed a monster from the netherworld river. Even its name was strange. "Shen Yu, tell me honestly. Why did you set up a formation here to harm people?" River Clam Shen Yu replied weakly, "There are often people from the celestial world coming and going on this road. This lowly one is sick of the food in the Netherworld River, so I wanted to change my taste. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xian's expressions twitched. They didn't expect to almost become food in someone else's mouth. At this moment, the glacier under their feet shook violently again, and the sound of ice cracking could be heard. The entire glacier continued to split into smaller pieces, and the ice beneath their feet flowed even faster. Were we trapped by his mirage mist formation for a few hours? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked Grey Cloud Xian. The latter nodded in confusion. Yu Qianqiu squinted at Xinyu and sneered. A few hours of delay and now there's a burden? Yee. Xinyu, I can't vent my anger. Tell me, why should I spare your life? Xinyu panicked. He swallowed the bead but didn't dare to run. He waved his hand and denied, not a burden, not a burden. May I ask if the two of you are going to Twilight City? The two looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, how do you know? This lowly one only deduced it from the direction the two of you were flying in. As long as the two of you spare my life, I'm willing to take the two of you on the river. I won't be slower than the two of you in the air, Xinyu begged. He didn't doubt that Yu Qianqiu would kill him if he was unhappy. This Netherworld River connects to Twilight City? Yu Qianqiu confirmed with Grey Cloud Xian. Grey Cloud Xian nodded. Twilight City is indeed not far from the Netherworld River. Then hurry up. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and shouted. Xinyu had a green fire bead in his body, so he wasn't afraid of him playing tricks. Jianghu nodded in delight. He twisted his limbs and the wounds on his body healed at a visible rate. Even his palm, which had been blasted apart by the flying sword, had recovered to its original state. However, his dark face appeared somewhat pale. Clearly, this method of healing consumed a lot of his cultivation. Suddenly, Xinyu quickly retreated more than 10 meters on the glacier and crawled on the cracked ice. His body flickered and a huge river clam appeared on the ice. It was dark brown and oval in shape. It was more than 10 meters long and 4 to 5 meters thick. It was very rare. Grey Cloud Xian was a knowledgeable person, but he couldn't help but exclaim, for a river clam to grow to your size, it must have cultivated for a long time. Yu Qianqiu was also amazed. He was a cultivator, so he knew that it was extremely difficult for this kind of shellfish to cultivate. It was many times more difficult than other animals. It was a miracle that it could grow to such a large size. Xinyu's voice came from the huge river clam. He smiled bitterly and said, I lived for 500,000 years in ignorance. Later on, my spiritual wisdom appeared, and after 500,000 years, I was lucky enough to find the knack of cultivation. After 200,000 years of cultivation, I have achieved what I have today. Great immortals, please get on my back. I will take you to Twilight City. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xn were shocked when they heard this. They looked at each other and then flashed to the back of the giant clam. Great immortals, sit tight. As soon as he finished his words, the oval-shaped giant clam started to move on its own at an extremely fast speed. With a swish, it slipped away on the ice surface. In the blink of an eye, it slid out of the ice and plunged into the cold Styx River. Its back was less than 1 meter above the water, but the surface area was more than 3 meters square. It was enough for Grey Cloud Xian and Yu Qianqiu to stand or sit. Xinyu wasn't bragging. His speed in the water was indeed not slower than Grey Cloud Xian's flying shuttle. The two stood on his back and felt the coolness of the Styx River. They looked at the scenery of the underworld and felt refreshed. The strangest thing was that when such a huge river clam moved through the water, not a single splash was made. Not even the slightest sound could be heard. It could be seen that this old and experienced fellow in the Netherworld River was really good at manipulating water. Grey Cloud Xn suddenly looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. With his vast experience, he must have taken advantage of Yu Qianqiu and experienced the feeling of swimming in the Styx River for the first time. If he told the people of the Heartless Palace about this experience, they would definitely be fascinated. Everyone had vanity. It depended on which aspect it was. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that Grey Cloud Xn had such vain thoughts. After he recovered from his shock, he looked around and sat on the slightly protruding shell in the middle. He patted the shell and said, Xinyu, from what you said earlier, you've lived for at least 1.2 million years? I've lived for so many years in vain. I'm not as powerful as the two great immortals. Xinyu was humbled to show that he had lived for so many years. Legend has it that the Styx River flowed through the entire underworld since ancient times. There are even rumors that say without the Styx River, there would be no underworld. There are even more exaggerated sayings that say without the Styx River, there would be no living beings in the 3 realms. Although these are all exaggerations, I think only such an ancient river can have living beings like you who have lived for millions of years. Gray Cloud XN sighed as he faced the cool breeze of the Styx River. Then he looked at his feet and said, "You can live for 500,000 years before your intelligence is developed. I think you must be an ancient mutant, similar to the fierce beasts in our celestial world. Otherwise, normal living beings can't live for so many years before their cultivation is complete." Hehe. Great immortal, you flatter me. It would be great if I was an ancient mutant. Xinyu smiled bitterly and said, "Ancient mutants that can live as long as me can more or less have a place in the Styx River with their talents and abilities. They won't wander around the Styx River like me." Chapter 998. You're not. Songyun XN was taken aback at first, then exclaimed, "How is this possible? You haven't developed spiritual intelligence and haven't cultivated yet. How can you live for 500,000 years? Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. Although his cultivation level wasn't high in the immortal world, he still knew some basic knowledge about cultivation. If it wasn't a prehistoric ferocious beast or an extremely special kind of ferocious beast that had accidentally devoured a now extinct heavenly treasure in a distant era, it was possible for it to live for hundreds of thousands of years with its strong physical body before it developed spiritual intelligence. Even so, it was still rare to hear of someone living over 500,000 years. Even those immortals had never heard of anyone who could live for more than 1,000,000 years. Of course, this wasn't to say that immortality was fake. It was just that the rise and fall of immortals were unpredictable. No one could predict what accidents would happen. It was as if there was some mysterious power that didn't allow a person to live forever. No matter how healthy one's physical body was, there would always be all kinds of calamities that forcefully took away one's life. The most common was fighting and killing for the sake of profit or grudges. This was the culprit that took away an immortal's life. Even immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who controlled the immortal world, and Underworld Emperor Bai Qi, who controlled the underworld, didn't live for more than 500,000 years. It should be known that 500,000 years was definitely not a small number when compared to the passing of time. I don't know why either. Xinyu sighed. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xang glanced at each other. There was some suspicion in their eyes. They felt that this river clam was either bragging and hadn't lived for that long, or it didn't want to talk about it. Songyun Xang gave him a look as if to ask him to continue. Maybe he could get something out of it. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes as if saying, "I'm your enemy, why should I listen to you?" Songyun Xang was speechless. In fact, Yu Qianqiu had other thoughts in his mind. This Jiuyu's life is in my hands. If he really has a secret that he can't keep to himself, then it must be a big secret. I'm the only one who knows about it. Why should I let Grey Cloud Faith know about it? Both sides of the Netherworld River were gloomy. From time to time, specks of flowing light would dance in the air. Serpent carried the two of them and rode the waves without slowing down. The rolling waves of the Netherworld River retreated quickly like smoke. However, the waves in front of them came again, and they could not see the end of the waves. It was unknown when Songyun Xan had also sat down. He sat back to back with Yu Qianqiu. The two of them were silent as they sensed the heroic and vicissitudes of the Netherworld River. Looking at both sides of the river, there were sometimes plains, sometimes mountains, and sometimes gloomy valleys. Although they could not see clearly, the feeling of vastness made their hearts tremble. This feeling was indescribable. Yu Qianqiu, a newbie who had just arrived in the Netherworld, didn't think much of it. He felt that the Netherworld should be like this. On the other hand, Songyun Xan, who had been to the Netherworld several times, sighed with emotion. He did not expect to see the Netherworld in a completely different way when he traveled quickly on this ancient Netherworld River. It was as if only the Netherworld River understood the Netherworld the best. This was because every section of the winding river was created by it. It was washed and settled by the endless years. It was an ancient and gloomy beauty of vicissitudes. Perhaps darkness was the most primitive beauty. The Netherworld River was sometimes wide and sometimes narrow. However, the widest part was still a few hundred meters wide. Yu Qianqiu, who was looking at the scenery with his elbows on his knees and his palms supporting his chin, suddenly asked, "Serpent, how wide is the widest part of the Netherworld River?" "I've tried to cross the widest part once before. However, I walked and stopped from time to time and often changed directions. It took me a few years," Serpent replied seriously. "I'm afraid that with my current speed, I'll need to swim for more than a month to get from the other side to this side. I'm not sure how wide it is exactly." "So wide?" Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xan exclaimed at the same time. Obviously, it was Songyun Xan's first time hearing about it. The two of them suspected that Serpent was born to boast. He said that he had lived for more than 1,000,000 years, and now he said that he had created such a wide river. Was this really a river? It was more like a sea. Yu Qianqiu licked his lips and chuckled. I say, Serpent, you might have misunderstood me. You've mistaken the length of the Netherworld River for its width. I'm talking about the distance between us now. Ah. Great deity, you might think that I'm old and confused, but I'm not so old that I can't tell the difference between length and width. Speaking of the length of the Netherworld River, it's not something we can reach in a month with our current speed. Serpent sighed. Take the direction we're going now. If everything goes smoothly, it will take half a month to reach Twilight City. Then we'll have to walk for another month before we can reach the Endless Horizon, and this is under the condition that everything goes smoothly. Endless Horizon? Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked Songyun Xen, do you know that place? Songyun Xen also turned around and nodded. I've heard of that place, but I've never been there. It seems that the people from the Netherworld that I've come into contact with are quite afraid of that place, and no one is willing to talk about it too much. That place is known as the punishment land of the Netherworld, so of course they're afraid. Serpent laughed and continued. Speaking of the Endless Horizon, you should be able to imagine that the distance that the Netherworld River traverses through is already incredibly long when you hear the word endless. After passing through the Endless Horizon, it's the boundless and mysterious land of darkness. I'm afraid no one knows how long the Netherworld River is there. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xen immediately gasped when they saw something specific for comparison. They finally understood how long the Netherworld River was. Its length was a concept that was very, very long, as if it was very far away, but no one could tell exactly how long it was. This was the length of the Netherworld River. While Songyun Xen was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu was already distracted. This was because Serpent mentioned the boundless and mysterious land of darkness. Rumor had it that Bai Changchun escaped to that place when he was being chased by the Emperor of the Netherworld. In this way, there was no need to go to Twilight City to inquire about the information. According to Serpent, they could just follow the Netherworld River and cross the Endless Horizon to reach there. But then again, since it was along the way, there was no harm in going to Twilight City to take a look. If the World Commerce Chamber really grew stronger one day, they would inevitably have to deal with that place. It was a good thing for him to explore the situation first, but that Endless Horizon. Serpent, what do you mean when you say that the Endless Horizon is the land of punishment in the Netherworld? Yu Qianqiu smiled. Also, you said that they are naturally afraid, but from what you said, you don't seem to be afraid at all. Haha. Serpent explained with a smile, the Netherworld is not as stable as the immortal world. You must have heard of the degree of chaos here. Many restless people who offend the Netherworld Royal Palace will be captured and sent to the Endless Horizon for punishment. Their dantian will be sealed so that they can't self-destruct or use their cultivation. They will be forced to do all kinds of hard labor day and night until they die of exhaustion. This kind of punishment is quite cruel to criminals. Many criminals can't stand this endless torture and commit suicide. However, this is the Netherworld. Even if you commit suicide, there are ways to imprison your primordial spirit and soul, reforge your body, and let you be reborn with your memory. You will continue to suffer until you die of exhaustion. This is called living a life worse than death. Begging for life, begging for death. The Endless Horizon also has another meaning, which is endless torture. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xan were silent. They didn't think that the so-called Endless Horizon was such a den of demons. They had never heard of such a way of punishment. The two of them could imagine the misery and suffering that the prisoners who were imprisoned there had to go through. Just imagine, even the right to die was taken away. Such a cruel punishment made the two of them shudder and their scalps go numb just thinking about it. As for why I'm not afraid of the Endless Horizon, it's because the Netherworld Royal Palace has no right to punish us. The Netherworld Royal Palace and the Netherworld Royal Palace have an agreement that we will not invade each other. If the people of the land invade us, we will report to the Netherworld Royal Palace and ask them to give us an explanation. Similarly, if we invade the people of the land, they will also report to us and we will also have to give them an explanation. I've heard of this. Grey Cloud Xian interrupted. That's why I found it strange that the Netherworld Royal Palace would attack us. We didn't offend you. You are from the immortal realm. Naturally, you are not included in the agreement between the Netherworld Royal Palace and the Netherworld Royal Palace. Jianghu said weakly, his voice much softer. Grey Cloud Xian and Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look at each other. This reason was simple and sufficient. Who asked them to not be from the Netherworld Royal Palace? Yu Qianqiu stood up and looked at Grey Cloud Xian. Isn't the Netherworld Emperor in charge of the entire Netherworld? Why is there an exception for the Netherworld Royal Palace? Grey Cloud XN shook his head and said, I don't know. In any case, I heard that if the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace touch the Netherworld Royal Palace for no reason, they will be severely punished. Even most of the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace don't know why. But, as he said this, he lifted his heel and knocked on the shell. Since you have lived for so many years, you must have more experience than the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace. Moreover, you are one of the Netherworld Royal Palace's people. I'm sure you can answer our questions. Jianghu laughed proudly. This reason shouldn't be hard to guess. Since it is not under the Netherworld Emperor's control, it is naturally because he can't control it. Hearing this, the two looked at each other again. This reason was indeed simple, but it was also reasonable. It was just that people had thought too much about it and had confused themselves. But once they faced the truth, they realized that it was not a trivial matter. Yu Qianqiu said suspiciously, could it be that there is an expert in the Netherworld Royal Palace that even the Netherworld Emperor fears? Chapter 999. I don't know if there are any powerful cultivators in the Underworld River that even the Emperor of the Underworld is afraid of, Xinyu said slowly. Said Jianghu unhurriedly and slowly, but I know that in those broad areas of the Styx River, many aquatic creatures have lived much longer than me. I think there must be some powerful ones among them. His words were useless. Songyun Xan and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other and felt that this clam was not very honest. He had lived in the Underworld River for millions of years. How could he not have heard of the powerful cultivators in the Underworld River? Even if he hadn't heard of all of them, he must have heard of some of the more famous ones. But he used, I think, to brush us off. Sure enough, he was insatiable after we showed him some respect. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up into a sneer. Just as he was about to show Xinyu how powerful he was, he saw that the Netherworld River basin in front of him suddenly opened like the mouth of a kettle. It was as if it had instantly rushed into the vast sea. At the same time, Xinyu slowed down until he completely stopped, floating quietly in the Underworld River. An arched mountain appeared on the surface of the river in front of him. The mountain was 100 meters high, and the belly of the mountain was empty. The water rolled through the belly of the mountain, and the foot of the mountain on both sides seemed to be in the Underworld River. Rather than a mountain, it was more like an open door, giving people a feeling that it led to an unpredictable future. There were scattered fluorescent stars dancing in the sky from all directions, as if they had been summoned by some mysterious force. They all flew toward the hollow mountain in the Underworld River. Finally, they gathered and hovered in the hollow belly of the mountain. For a moment, they looked like countless glowing beads hanging on the water surface, sparkling under the reflection of the river. It was dark all around except for this place, which was the only bright pearl in the entire underworld, embedded in the belly of the mountain. It was so beautiful. Songyun Xian and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other, not knowing what it meant. Coincidentally, a fist-sized ball of fluorescent light flew past the two of them. So, Yu Qianqiu took out a long sword and stabbed the ball of fluorescent light as if he was stabbing a roast chicken. Grey Cloud XN instantly rolled his eyes and he cursed in his heart, isn't this kid a little too audacious? He attacked blindly before he figured out the situation. This is the Netherworld. Don't you want to live anymore? But since he had already done that, Grey Cloud XN craned his neck over to take a look. He saw that there was actually a fist-sized firefly stuck in the tip of the sword. It had a ferocious appearance and its jaws were as thick as a thumb. The ball of light trailing behind it was abnormally bright, and under the illumination of its tail, it was impossible to see what it was unless one took a closer look. *CKU. I was wondering what it was, so it's a firefly. It's rare to see such a big one. Yu Qianqiu snorted. Grey Cloud Xian also nodded slightly. So it was a firefly, so there shouldn't be any trouble. He was finally relieved. Just as the firefly was struggling in pain after its chest was pierced by the sword, a group of fast-moving streams of light in the distance seemed to have been attracted by the strange scene here. They immediately changed their direction and flew over quickly. Not long later, more than 100 people appeared in the sky, looking at the strange scene in the belly of the mountain. Grey Cloud Xian looked at those people and frowned slightly. It's the people from Hidden Dragon Villa. The moment he spoke, those people immediately turned around. When they saw Grey Cloud Xian and Yu Qianqiu, they were all stunned. The person in the lead took the lead and flashed over, and the others also flashed over. The person in the lead cupped his hands and said, so it's Heartless Palace's High Priest Grey. Prime Minister Ding greets you. Grey Cloud Xian cupped his hands perfunctorily and said, so it's Hidden Dragon Villa's Elder Ding. With that, he proudly turned his head to the side. Everyone didn't pay much attention to his arrogant actions. With his cultivation he was completely qualified. What everyone admired most was that this Grey Cloud Xian was really skilled and bold. He actually dared to stand in the Netherworld River and look at the scenery as if nothing had happened. He completely ignored the danger that could appear at any time. How bold. Everyone mistakenly thought that the two of them were standing on a rock in the Netherworld River. For a moment, no one noticed that there was a giant river clam floating in the water below. Everyone's gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. After a moment of suspicion, Ding Xiang cupped his hands and asked, "Could this be World Commerce's Yu Qianqiu, the sect leader?" From this, it could be heard that they had also heard about Grey Cloud Xian protecting Yu Qianqiu. Grey Cloud Xian's expression twitched when he heard that. That's right. Yu Qianqiu held his sword and cupped his hands to return the greeting. I've long heard of Hidden Dragon Villa's Elder Ding's great name. Seeing you today, you truly live up to your reputation. Elder Ding, please take care of me in the future. This fellow had never heard of Ding Xiang. However, since they had met without enmity, it wasn't tiring to be sweet. It would be a waste not to say nice things. I've been representing Hidden Dragon Villa in the Netherworld for a long time. I'm not famous in the immortal world. On the other hand, I've heard of sect leader Yu's reputation in the Netherworld. Ding Xiang smiled modestly. However, looking at the smile on his face, he should be really happy. Everyone liked to hear nice words. The Hidden Dragon Villa group looked at Yu Qianqiu with more kindness. Their gazes more or less looked at the firefly stuck in Yu Qianqiu's sword. After Yu Qianqiu noticed it, he immediately wiped his sword with 2 fingers and flicked the dimming firefly into the water. He then put away the sword in his hand. At this moment there was a splash on the water surface. Everyone's gaze turned to the water surface not far from Yu Qianqiu. The water rippled, and a round mouth suddenly appeared underwater. It swallowed the firefly that Yu Qianqiu had flicked to the surface. After this unknown thing swallowed the firefly, it quickly turned around and dived back into the water. As it turned around, everyone could faintly see black scales. They didn't know what monster it was. There's something in the river. Ding Xiang shouted softly. The group of people coordinated well and instantly teleported to a higher position in the sky. They stared at the river below with shining eyes. Yu Qianqiu was also startled. He pulled out the sword he had just put away and was on guard. A sword also appeared in Grey Cloud Xian's hand. He coldly swept his gaze over the river, but there was no longer any movement on the river. Xinyu, didn't you notice that there was something in the water just now? Yu Qianqiu asked as he patted Xinyu's shell with his foot. Don't worry, this is a Nether River Black Carp. It won't hurt you, Xinyu said excitedly. Nether River Black Carp? You mean the thing in the water was a carp? Yes. The conversation between the two fell into the ears of the people in the air, and it immediately caused a burst of surprise. It turned out that there was a living thing under their feet. When they looked carefully, they found that it actually faintly looked like the outline of a clam. There was such a big clam? Even though this group of people often traveled the Netherworld, they had never seen such a huge clam. Yu Qianqiu could hear the excitement in Xinyu's voice. He raised his eyebrows and said, Xinyu, why did you suddenly stop here? Is something going to happen? That's right. Xinyu said excitedly, Dragon Transformation Gate. It's a legendary spectacle that only appears once every 100,000 years. I didn't expect to see it. This is such a great fate. If we can witness the legendary scene of transforming into a dragon, we will be honored. Everyone could feel the rare excitement in his words, especially the 2 words Dragon Transformation, which made everyone's spirits rise. However, they still didn't understand what he meant. Yu Qianqiu looked around curiously and said, Xinyu, be clear. Who is transforming into a dragon? Of course it's the Nether River Black Carp. Xinyu said excitedly, the mountain gate in front is called the Dragon Transformation Gate. Legend has it that it will summon the black carp from the river Styx once every 100,000 years. If a black carp can leap over the dragon gate, it can transform into a black dragon and leave. Of course, this is only a legend. Many people wanted to witness such a spectacle, but they always returned in disappointment. They did not see the Nether River Black Carp being summoned by the Dragon Transformation Gate. As time passed, no one believed in this legend. I didn't expect to see it this time. This is a great opportunity. Everyone was shocked when they heard that. They did not expect such a miraculous thing to happen. Yu Qianqiu vaguely felt that this story was familiar. After being stunned for a while, he exclaimed in shock, There's a carp leaping over the dragon gate here too? As soon as these words came out, everyone's gazes focused on him, each of them filled with suspicion. Songyun Xan knew he would not get an answer, but he could not help but ask, "Where did you see a carp leaping over the dragon gate?" Yu Qianzhou was speechless. After his expression twitched awkwardly, he chuckled and said, "I've never seen such a mysterious thing before. I just think it's a little ridiculous. Could it be that a carp can really transform into a dragon after crossing the dragon gate?" Songyun Xan looked at him up and down suspiciously. He paused and said, "The mystery of the netherworld cannot be predicted with common sense. Since there is such a legend, there must be a reason for it." I hope that's the case. Then we'll have a feast for our eyes." Yu Qianzhou laughed perfunctorily. Seeing that everyone was looking at him with twinkling eyes, he stomped his foot and changed the topic. "Xinyu, you just mentioned some great opportunity. Even if the black carp leaped over the dragon gate and transformed into a dragon, what does it have to do with us?" "You can't say that." Xinyu's tone was filled with yearning. "Legend has it that among those who witnessed the black carp transforming into a dragon, there would always be someone who would form a good relationship with the black dragon and receive the black dragon's blessing in the future. Don't you think it's a great opportunity?" "I see." Yu Qianzhou rubbed his chin and muttered. Suddenly he felt that the sword in his hand was unusually dazzling. How could a good relationship be related to a weapon? He quickly put it away. Beside him, Songyun Xian also put away his sword. In short, everyone's eyes flickered with excitement. They were all dreaming of the legendary spring and autumn period. Bang! With a deafening sound, a bolt of purple lightning suddenly pierced through the night sky and directly struck the pitch-black and bare mountain gate. The gate was covered in purple lightning for a long time before disappearing. While everyone was still in shock, they suddenly felt a majestic and ancient aura slowly spread out from the mountain gate that stood in the water like a ripple. It was so frightening. Chapter 1000. At that moment, everyone seemed to have an illusion. The ancient and majestic aura that spread out like a ripple seemed to be mixed with an obscure Sanskrit incantation that was whispering in everyone's ears. The voice seemed to come from above the 9 heavens, but it also seemed to have traveled through ancient times. The ancient and sacred voice lingered in everyone's mind, making them have the urge to worship the mountain gate in the Netherworld River. However, what was strange was that when everyone woke up and tried to listen carefully to what was chanting in their ears, they realized that there was no sound at all. When they relaxed, they could immediately hear the chanting of the Sanskrit incantation again. It was abnormally magical and mysterious, making it difficult for them to understand what was going on. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and felt as if someone was hypnotizing him. He focused his attention and stared at the mountain gate. He asked suspiciously, "Xinyu, did you hear that? What's going on?" "I heard it, but I don't know what's going on. It's also my first time experiencing this," Xinyu said with a confused tone. The mountain gate was 100 meters tall, and the hole at its belly was 40 to 50 meters tall and wide. The countless fireflies that gathered there suddenly became chaotic. The surface of the water around the mountain gate was stirred, and a large group of black carps of various sizes appeared. They floated below the water and kissed the surface of the water. Their black tails and dorsal fins stirred the water from time to time. Everyone looked at each other. At that moment, everyone could see clearly that they were indeed black carps. They could not help but have more confidence in the legend of the carps leaping over the dragon's gate. The densely packed black carps that suddenly appeared in a chaotic manner immediately became orderly after a moment of chaos. They all circled around the entire mountain gate with their heads and tails in a circle. After swimming for a few laps, a nether river black carp that was almost 2 meters long suddenly broke away from the parade and jumped out of the water. Like an arrow, it charged at the center of the hollow mountain gate and dived into the dancing fluorescent lights. Shaking its head and wagging its tail, it opened its mouth and swallowed quite a few fist-sized fireflies before it finally lost its momentum and fell into the water with a splash. After one took the lead, the Netherworld River black carps that were patrolling behind immediately followed suit. One by one, they leaped out of the water and shot into the group of fireflies that had gathered at the center of the mountain gate. After biting the fireflies, they drew an arc in the air and fell into the Netherworld River. Not long after, the sound of water flowing out and falling into the water could be heard, rising and falling like rain. Such a spectacle was rarely seen. The strangest thing was that those fireflies would rather fly in panic inside the mountain gate to avoid being devoured, but they didn't know to fly out of the mountain gate to escape the fate of being devoured, as if they were imprisoned here by an inexplicable force. Several hours later, the number of fireflies inside the mountain gate had decreased by more than half, and the light under the mountain gate had also weakened a lot. It was unknown when Yu Qianqiu had sat down again. He looked at the group of big and small carps jumping around in front of him and almost dozed off. At first it was a little novel, but he couldn't stand watching such boring and monotonous movements for a few hours. "Xinyu, are you sure this is a carp leaping over the dragon gate?" Yu Qianqiu asked in boredom as he sat there with his hands supporting his chin. The others also felt a little bored watching. Although those carps were strong, with the smallest one being a meter long, and the bigger ones being more than 3 meters long, they were considered big among the carps. However, they could leap more than 10 meters, 20 meters, or even dozens of meters high. Could they cross the mountain gate that was 100 meters high? Everyone felt that it was a little ridiculous. It was simply a joke for these Netherworld River black carps to leap over the dragon gate and transform into dragons. It was better for everyone to leave as soon as possible to avoid wasting time. "Of course," Xinyu replied briefly. From his tone he was still full of energy. "Pfft." Yu Qianqiu snorted in disdain and suddenly took out a fishing rod. It was the treasure that he had taken from the 4 Islands sect masters. Sangyun Xen looked at the fishing rod in front of him and was stunned. "What are you trying to do?" Xinyu's attention was also attracted by it. When he realized that Yu Qianqiu had taken out his fishing rod, he immediately exclaimed, "What are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do?" Yu Qianqiu sneered as if he was saying that it was obvious. Was there a need to ask? He swung the fishing rod in his hand, and a thin white light shot out. It shot into the school of Netherworld River black carps that were hundreds of meters away. With a splash, there was the sound of water splashing. Along with Xinyu's exclamation, a 1-meter-long Netherworld River black carp was pulled out of the water by the thin white light and flew over instantly. Yu Qianqiu quickly stood up and reached out to grab the fin that was flying over. He held the fishing rod with one hand and the Netherworld River black carp with the other. Disregarding the water droplets that the struggling carp splashed on his face, he continued to chuckle. "What a fat and big carp. I think you can forget about leaping through the dragon gate. How about? I wonder what it tastes like." The group of people in the sky looked down speechlessly. One should know that those who came from the celestial world would be warned by their seniors to abide by one rule, which was to try not to provoke the water race in the Netherworld River. However, this guy was too bold. Sangyun Xan was stunned. "Yu Qianqiu, what are you trying to do? Let it go quickly. Don't cause any trouble." "What trouble can there be? There are millions of Netherworld River black carps here. Didn't I just catch a carp?" Yu Qianqiu licked his lips. Although it's a little dark, it must have a unique flavor. His meaning could not be more obvious. He wanted to taste the Netherworld River black carp. Xinyu, who was stunned, immediately came back to his senses and exclaimed, "Great Immortal, quickly let him go." Yu Qianqiu stomped his foot on the shell and snorted. "When King wanted to eat us, why weren't you so polite? I just wanted to eat a carp of your water race. What are you so anxious about? If you don't want to die, shut up." "Wah, let me go." A child's voice came. Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately widened. The fin that was in his hand turned into a small, tender arm. The Netherworld River black carp that was tied up by the fishing line turned into a little boy wearing a black doo-doo. The little boy had a small braid on his head, and there was an intricately crafted golden chain around his neck. He was currently struggling on the fishing line, looking at Yu Qianqiu with a horrified expression. *CK. Yu Qianqiu cried out in alarm and immediately let go of the little arm he was grabbing. He looked at the little boy struggling on the fishing rod in a daze. He was not primitive enough to eat humanoid animals. At the same time, he faintly felt that he was in trouble. Sangyun Xang carefully sized up the little boy. He realized that he was already at the final stage of the Tribulation Transcendent stage at such a young age. He could transform. Clearly he was a demon from the Netherworld River. He did not know what kind of treasure Yu Qianqiu's fishing rod was. The thin fishing line could tie up a Tribulation Transcendent stage demon, but the demon could not break free. He immediately rolled his eyes at Yu Qianqiu and shouted in a low voice, "You're crazy, kid. Why aren't you letting him go?" The little boy saw that he could not escape after struggling for a while. His tender voice pierced through the night sky. "Big sister, save me." There was still help. Yu Qianqiu sweated profusely as he looked at the surrounding water. He lifted the fishing rod and the little boy was immediately pulled over. He clamped the little boy's arm with the fishing rod and covered the little boy's mouth with his other hand. He squeezed out a kind smile and said, "Don't shout. I mean you no harm. Unexpectedly, the little boy looked as if he had seen his grandmother wolf. He became even more panicked and struggled desperately. Anyone who was tied up, clamped under the arm, and covered with his mouth would not believe that the other party did not mean them any harm. At this moment, the surface of the water 100 meters ahead suddenly bubbled with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters. It seemed like something was going to emerge from the water. Yu Qianqiu could clearly feel Shen Yu trembling under his feet. It was slowly retreating. The people in the air were shocked. Gray Cloud Xian's expression changed as well. He hid his hands in his sleeves and was on guard. It seemed like the Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique could erupt at any time. Yu Qianqiu also panicked. His eyes darted around and he suddenly bent down to whisper in the little boy's ear, "I really don't mean you any harm. Do you want to make the great leap and become a black dragon?" Although he was in a desperate situation, he finally felt the pulse accurately. The little boy under his arm stopped struggling and obediently let him hold him. He stared at him with wide eyes blinking. Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "As long as you stop shouting, I have a way to help you make the great leap. What do you think?" The little boy immediately nodded even though his mouth was covered. Yu Qianqiu then slowly tried to move his hand away. Seeing that the little boy was very obedient and was looking at him expectantly, he glanced at the water column that was already several meters high on the surface of the Netherworld River like a fountain. He immediately untied the little boy in a flurry and hid the fishing rod quickly. Then he picked up the little boy with his heart thumping. He pretended to be relaxed and smiled as if he was looking at the scenery. "What's your name?" The little boy hugged his neck and replied in a childish voice, "My name is Xiao Yuan." "What's your name?" Yu Qianqiu immediately chuckled proudly. "My name is Yu Qianqiu. It means you as in leaping over the dragon's gate. Don't you think we're fated? You can just call me Brother Yu." The little boy's eyes lit up. He nodded and said, "Brother Yu?" When he said that, Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed into a line. He thought to himself, that was close. Is that even possible? Many of the people from the hidden Dragon Mountain villa in the air swayed. They looked at each other speechlessly as if they couldn't accept this reality. Songyun Xen looked at the little boy who was being intimate with Yu Qianqiu as if he was looking at an idiot. He thought to himself, no matter what, he's at the end of the tribulation stage, so he shouldn't be too young. How could he be so retarded and so easily fooled? What the hell? Shen Yu, who had been slowly retreating, also shivered. He stabilized his body in the water and stopped retreating. Everyone's attention was then attracted by the water column that was more than 10 meters high. In the middle of the water column, a graceful and beautiful woman in black slowly rose. Her bright eyes suddenly looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding the little boy. Chapter 1001. Xiao Yuan. A voice as clear as spring water rang out. The beautiful black-clothed woman looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. She didn't seem to know this person, but why? The boy in Yu Qianqiu's arms immediately waved his hand happily and shouted, "Big sister, come here quickly." "Damn it! Why did you call your sister here?" Yu Qianqiu smiled guiltily and said, "Xiao Yuan, is this your sister?" The boy nodded and said, "She's my third sister." "Is she beautiful?" "Beautiful. Hee, so beautiful." Yu Qianqiu couldn't stop praising. But Song Yunxin secretly transmitted his voice to him. "This woman is a late-stage underworld supreme. I'm afraid she's not simple. Be careful." The water spouting from the Netherworld River slowly descended and disappeared behind the surface of the water. The graceful and beautiful woman walked over on the water with light steps. Although her steps were slow, they had the essence of shrinking the ground into inches. Her movements seemed to be neither too fast nor too slow as she leisurely walked forward. Each step was like a dream. She had already advanced several dozen meters and arrived in front of Yu Qianqiu in just a few steps. The lady's hair was tied up high and her hair reached her waist. Although her appearance was not bad, it was still inferior to Lu Yanqing and Ji Wu. However, her calm temperament was not something ordinary people could see. She was quiet and serene, giving people an indescribable feeling. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu and Song Yunxin suddenly looked down at their feet. The clam had silently dived into the water. The two had no choice but to stand on the water surface. Yu Qianqiu wanted to question Ji Yu, but he wanted to maintain his demeanor. He cursed in his heart, "Try running if you have the guts." In fact, Ji Yu didn't want to run either. He turned into his human form and emerged from the water surface. He bowed to the lady walking on the water surface and said, "Greetings, third princess." "Ji Yu?" The lady frowned slightly. The two obviously knew each other. She just didn't expect Jiyu to turn into his human form. Third princess? Such a big background? Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xan looked at each other. The woman's gaze then fell on the two of them. When she realized that she couldn't see through their cultivation, she was slightly startled and said, "You two are?" Without waiting for the two to reply, the water in front of them spewed out several water columns in succession. Several good-looking men and women appeared at the top of the water columns. The way they appeared was much more intense than the third princess's appearance. The men and women all had an extraordinary aura. Although the style of their clothes was different, they were all black. Judging from their appearance and behavior, it was obvious that they were of noble birth. They first stared at the mountain gate for a while, then looked around and saw that the third princess was actually standing together with two people from the immortal world. They were all stunned, especially when they saw that Xiao Yuan was being carried by one of them, and they were even more surprised. When they realized that they couldn't see through the cultivation of the two visitors from the immortal world, they all lowered the water heads and flashed over. Shen Yu's face was filled with fear as he bowed repeatedly, "Greetings to the Crown Prince, Second Crown Prince, Third Crown Prince, Princess, Second Princess." He bowed to all of the 5 men and women that came after him. These people have different levels of cultivation, but they are all at the level of a nether lord. I wonder which royal family they are from in the River Styx's water tribe. How impressive. Before Songyun Xang could finish transmitting his voice to Yu Qianqiu, the boy in Yu Qianqiu's arms suddenly shouted at Jiyu in a childish voice, "I am the 4th Crown Prince of the Li Palace. Why don't you greet me?" Everyone fell silent when they heard this. The people of the Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor and Songyun Xan all looked at Yu Qianqiu with strange gazes. Little did they know that every hair on Yu Qianqiu's face froze. He was speechless. He didn't expect that the fish he had casually caught with his fishing rod would be the 4th Crown Prince of the Li Palace. Now he was even being carried by his father. What a coincidence. Heavens, what kind of joke is this? Xiao Yuan, don't be rude. When father and mother are here, we will punish you for leaving the palace without permission. The third princess who came first shouted. Her words undoubtedly confirmed the child's identity. Xiao Yuan, who was in Yu Qianqiu's arms, pouted, while Yu Qianqiu looked at the child in his arms with a twitching expression. He wanted to cry but no tears came. 7 Netherlord experts came and 2 old fellows were coming. You unlucky child, why did you sneak out without permission? If you didn't sneak out, would I have been able to catch you with my fishing rod? Now he wanted to grab this child and slap him. A disobedient child was too annoying. The most painful thing was that his words just now were to fool this child. How would he know how to jump the dragon gate? If he directly jumped over with this child's tribulation passing stage cultivation, there would be no problem at all. Not to mention the group of Netherlord experts in front of him. How could a mere height of 100 meters stop them? Clearly there was something else that he didn't know. If he was exposed and he escaped first, who knew if these people would be able to kill Songyun Xian? Yu Qianqiu thought. Jiu Yu's speechless gaze retracted from Yu Qianqiu's face. He bowed to Xiao Yuan and said, "Greetings, 4th Crown Prince." Xiao Yun immediately looked at the third princess who stopped him and chuckled. The boss, who was addressed as Crown Prince by Jiu Yu, looked at Songyun Xian and Yu Qianqiu coldly. He cupped his fists and said, "I am Li Zhong, the Crown Prince of the Li Palace of the Styx River. May I know how to address the 2 experts from the immortal world? I presume you are not nameless people from the immortal world." Before he could reply, there was another movement in the Styx River. The loud noise attracted everyone's attention. Suddenly, a white wave surged into the sky from afar. After the wave passed, thousands of black-armored mighty soldiers holding long spears or swords at their waists rose from the water. In the middle, there was a sturdy and ugly single-horned water rhinoceros with a splendid carriage on it. 2 dignified and noble-dressed people who looked like a couple sat on it. The 2 armored soldiers who were in the front row waved their long whips in a circle and suddenly shook them. A pah sound rang through the night sky. A group of people immediately rode the waves and came over. It was not a small show. Yu Qianqiu and the others were not fools. They could guess who had come. It was probably the father and mother of the princes and princesses in front of them. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Songyun Xian. He was very hesitant. Should he leave? But if he ran now, it would be difficult for him to survive in the underworld in the future. The people of the Hidden Dragon Manor in the air had already quickly moved far away. They stood in the air and watched. It was fine if they could not see clearly. Not causing trouble was the most important thing. After the group of water race soldiers arrived in front of them, a wave surged in the middle and separated to the 2 sides, creating an empty passage. The entire passage was filled with snow-white waves. The sturdy single-horned water rhinoceros slowly stepped on the waves and stopped about 10 meters away from the group. The princes and princesses of the Li Palace all knelt down on one knee. Even Xiao Yuan, who was in Yu Qianzhou's arms, broke free and bowed in unison. "We pay our respects to father and mother." Shen Yu also knelt down and bowed. "We pay our respects to your majesty and empress." The dignified round-faced man with a long beard waved his hand and said, "All of you may rise." Yu Qianzhou and Songyun Xn only cupped their hands and bowed. After all, the two of them were subordinates of the immortal world's Grand Commander Jin. In the underworld, they would at most pay their respects to the Emperor of the Underworld. It was not good for others to be overly courteous. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, had a stomach full of doubts. What was going on with the Emperor of the Underworld? He was too much of an Amitabha. He did not care about the appearance of an emperor. At this moment, the noble lady on the carriage waved her hand and said, "Xiao Yuan." Xiao Yuan immediately flashed behind Yu Qianzhou, not daring to show his face. Clearly he was afraid of being punished for leaving the palace without permission. In this way Yu Qianzhou did not know whether to laugh or cry. The gazes of the Emperor and Empress of the Li Palace were all focused on him. It was hard for him not to attract attention. Songyun Xn also secretly transmitted his voice. "These two have reached the intermediate stage of the Emperor of the Underworld. Do not underestimate them." The two people on the carriage immediately sized up Yu Qianzhou and Songyun Xn. Songyun Xn's intermediate stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World had already shocked them. It should be known that in the Immortal World, immortal emperors would not casually come to the Underworld. However, when they discovered that they could not see through Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, they were shocked. Logically speaking, this person's cultivation had clearly reached the advanced stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World. Otherwise, they would have been able to see through his cultivation. Could it be that in the Immortal World, besides Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, there was someone else who had reached the advanced stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World? Why had they never heard of him? It should be known that it was very difficult for the people of the Immortal World to find out about the Underworld River's water race, but it was not difficult for the Underworld River's water race to find out about the Immortal World. After all, it was easy for one side to send their subordinates to the shore in human form, but it was difficult for the people on the shore to disguise as the water race to the Underworld River. The two looked at each other and stood up. Although the Underworld River's water race did not have much contact with the Immortal World, they did not dare to be careless. At the very least they had to be courteous. This immediately shocked the crown princes and princesses. They all turned to look at the two. They did not dare to be disrespectful to people who could be treated like this by their imperial father and imperial mother. Shen Yu looked at the two of them with trepidation and thought to himself, "Where did these two come from?" The two cupped their hands. The dignified man smiled. "I am the lord of the Li Palace of the Underworld River, Li Guang. I did not know that there were experts from the immortal world here. I wonder how I should address you two experts?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at Songyun Xn and thought, "Even if I told them about my small sect they probably would not know." Songyun Xn maintained the demeanor of a large sect. He raised his hand to return the greeting and said loudly, "I am Songyun Xn from the immortal world's passionless palace. Greetings, your majesty, empress." "So you are the chief consecrator of the number one sect in the immortal world, passionless palace, Songyun Xn. No wonder you have such cultivation. It is an honor to meet you." Li Guang nodded and smiled. From this, it could be seen that he was rather well informed about the news in the immortal world. However, he was suddenly stunned, and his gaze swept back and forth between Songyun Xn and Yu Qianzhou. He seemed to have thought of something, and he looked at Yu Qianzhou and asked doubtfully, "Could it be that you're the sect master of the Immortal World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianzhou?" Chapter 1002. When he said this, the most shocked person was Yu Qianzhou. His mouth was wide open. "Oh my God! When did I have such a great reputation that even the water race hiding in the river Styx know my name?" Grey Cloud Xion's face darkened on the spot. From the other party's reaction just now, it was very likely that the reason why the other party knew Yu Qianzhou's name was because he had heard of Grey Cloud Xion's name. This meant that the matter of him following the Celestial Emperor's decree to protect Yu Qianzhou had already spread throughout the netherworld. Father is wise, he is indeed Yu Qianzhou, big brother Yu as in leaping over the dragon gate. Xiao Yuan didn't miss the opportunity to poke his head out from behind Yu Qianzhou and flatter him. Yu Qianzhou tilted his head and glanced at him, speechless. "If I had known that you would have a father, I wouldn't have been your big brother Yu." but he still cupped his hands and smiled at Li Guang. Yu Qianqiu of the Immortal Realms World Chamber of Commerce greets your Majesty and Empress. Actually, after a moment of thought, he also realized that even if the Emperor had heard of him, it was impossible for him to recognize him. To be able to recognize him as Yu Qianqiu at a glance, it was most likely because of ashy cloud letters. The group of crown princes and princesses looked strangely at Yu Qianqiu, then at their father and mother. They had also heard of the World Chamber of Commerce's sect master Yu Qianqiu who had caused trouble in the Immortal Realm, but they didn't know how their father could recognize Yu Qianqiu at a glance. What they didn't know was that Li Guang and his wife had received the news about Yu Qianqiu and Ashing Yun Xn just before they set off. This news hadn't had time to spread in the Li Palace yet. Li Guang and his wife looked at each other, smiled faintly, then slowly sat back down. There had long been a rumor in the immortal world that Yu Qianqiu was able to conceal his cultivation level because he had mistakenly consumed some kind of immortal pill. In reality, his cultivation level was nothing special. In this way, the couple's suspicion that Yu Qianqiu was a late-stage Immortal Emperor expert was resolved. With Cangyun Xian's mid-stage Immortal Emperor cultivation base, it was not worthy for the couple to stand and reply. In the distant sky, Ding Xiang and the others in the Hidden Dragon Villa could only vaguely see the two parties interacting. As for what they were saying, they could not hear it clearly. At this moment, the fireflies in the empty belly of the mountain gate gradually scattered under the sound of the fish jumping in the water. The gazes of all the aquatic creatures turned in that direction, and the atmosphere instantly changed. Grey Cloud Xian's face tensed up as he looked over. Yu Qianqiu looked around in confusion, wondering what was going on. As the last Nether River black carp leaped up, the last wandering firefly was devoured, and the last ray of light in the belly of the mountain was extinguished. In an instant, not a single ray of light could be seen on the surface of the river, and only the sound of the surging water could be heard. Rumble. There was a deafening rumble, and more than a dozen bolts of purple lightning flashed in the sky, illuminating the world with a purple haze. The strangest thing was that the bolts of purple lightning did not disappear after they appeared. Instead, they kept flashing and changing into arcs. The bolts of purple lightning formed a circle, spiraling continuously in the dark sky. Moreover, it spun faster and faster until it was like a rotating purple light. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He felt that this spiraling purple light was like a teleportation gate from the immortal world to the netherworld. Could it be that something was coming to the netherworld from another space, on the towering Minghuang mountain surrounded by the 5 peaks? Inside the simple yet magnificent, sacred yet mysterious Minghuang royal harem, a small building stood in the middle of a secluded forest. The attic on the second floor had an open window, and the only light inside came from the fireflies crawling on the roof. Looking out from the attic, one couldn't see the sun, moon, or stars, but there were many fireflies in the secluded forest, like stars in the night sky. Everything seemed so quiet and tranquil. The night wind blew, and the silver-armored thousand soldiers' long hair fluttered. He was wearing a silver armor, and his face was full of stubble. He was silently looking at the slowly crawling stars in the secluded forest, and no one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, the sound of a paper scroll being pulled came from the attic, and then a gentle voice sounded, "Thousand Soldier, have you recovered from your injury?" The white-robed scholar didn't even raise his head. After pulling the paper scroll, he added ink to the brush in his hand. He gently put one hand behind his back, and the other hand held the brush and added ink to the paper scroll. The silver-armored thousand soldier slowly turned around and walked to the side of the scholar. Seeing that the ink on the inkstone was about to run out, he picked up the wooden spoon on the table, and gently scooped up a small spoonful of water and poured it on the inkstone. Then he put the wooden spoon back into the basin and picked up the ink on the inkstone. With a slight rustling sound, he helped the scholar grind the ink on the inkstone. While grinding, he said, "My injury is healed, but the shock in my heart is still not gone. Yes, I'm also very surprised. I didn't expect such an expert to appear in the human world. It is really unimaginable. This person is indeed not simple." As the scholar said this, the tip of the brush in his hand suddenly started to delicately sculpt. The thin face of an old man in a green robe appeared vividly under the tip of the brush, and the drawing was very realistic. It was by Changchun, whom Yu Qianqiu had been searching for so long without any news of him. The content of the painting was majestic, and the order of the content was by Changchun defeating the silver-armored thousand soldier. Then it was the fierce battle with the 4 netherworld generals. The content of the painting was the scene of the scholar fighting with Bai Changchun. "I didn't expect him to be able to escape from your hands. The silver-armored thousand soldier paused and looked at the painting. He carefully ground the ink and said, "To be able to have you paint for him, he died with honor." Died. The brush in the scholar's hand stopped, and then he shook his head and continued to paint. Perhaps. Do you suspect that he didn't die? Even if he didn't die at that time, can he still come out alive after escaping into that place? The silver-armored thousand soldier put down the ink in his hand and said with a frown, "He wasn't a match for you at all. You chased him all the way and you still let him escape. What exactly happened?" The scholar laughed softly and added ink to the brush in his hand. Perhaps he had thought of something and the tip of the brush landed on the painting. Although Bai Changchun's green robe was already torn, his expression became more and more fierce. That impassioned aura of fighting against the heavens and earth leaped out, causing people's hearts to tremble. The silver-armored thousand soldier let out a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but think of the scene where he fought with this person. At that time, I hit him 1,300 times consecutively. Given his cultivation, it was already a miracle among miracles that he didn't die from such serious injuries. The scholar revealed a bitter smile that he hadn't shown for many years. He shook his head and said, "This person's willpower is so strong that it's terrifying. As long as he's still breathing, he definitely won't admit defeat." When he realized that the difference in strength between us was too great, I also cherished his talent. I once told him that as long as he admitted defeat and submitted to me, I could spare his life and give him everything that I could. The silver-armored thousand soldier laughed and said, "Obviously he rejected me. Otherwise, why would he be forced to escape into that place?" The scholar suddenly straightened his back and looked at the distant night sky. He sighed and said, "That's right, he rejected me." The words of rejection still resounded in my ears. He said, "If you want me to submit to you, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall under your feet." If you want me to submit to you, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall under your feet. The silver-armored thousand soldier silently repeated a few times. His emotions were stirred up as he said, "What a character. Right now, I really want to go to that world and see what's going on there. How could such a character appear in that world?" The scholar waved his hand and said, "Don't even think about it. Jin Tai and I have a premonition that there's something waiting for us there. Once those people who provoked the heavens' punishment return there, they'll definitely suffer retribution. You're one of them." The silver-armored thousand soldier was silent for a while and said, "With his cultivation and speed, there's no way he could escape from your pursuit. You should have had countless opportunities to kill him. Could it be because you cherished his talent and couldn't bear to kill him, so you forced him into that place and let him fend for himself? You've overestimated me and underestimated him. Since I can't subdue him, I won't let this scourge live." The scholar shook his head and dipped the brush in his hand in ink again. He began to paint the scene of him chasing after Bai Changchun. As he painted, he said, "Although this person's cultivation wasn't high, he did have some ability. I reckon that at that time all the blood in his body had already flowed out, but he stubbornly held on and would rather die than surrender. He wouldn't give up until the end. While he was escaping, he released a portion of the celestial essence in his body. After the golden arcs formed by the celestial essence fused with the heaven and earth, a strong gale suddenly rose between heaven and earth. The gale was like a strong wind, pushing him to escape, but at the same time, it blocked my pursuit. In such a situation where he couldn't stop me, countless shocking thunderbolts appeared between heaven and earth. I chased him all the way and the countless thunderbolts bombarded me all the way. That's not all. In the end, all kinds of extreme phenomena such as snow, rain, wind, frost, and thunderbolts appeared one after another to help him escape. I couldn't help but suspect that it was the heavens' punishment. Even thinking about it now makes my scalp tingle. How could this be? This was the first time the silver-armored thousand soldier had heard of such a strange thing. He was stunned and said, "Could it be that this person's cultivation method can borrow the power of heaven and earth?" "I'm afraid so." The scholar smiled bitterly and said, "I can feel that the power of heaven and earth moved according to his stubborn will. It followed him all the way, but it made things difficult for me. If not for this, how could he have escaped from me? However, the price he paid was also huge. The moment he barged into that place, I could feel that his cultivation was almost exhausted. His blood was drained, his cultivation was exhausted, and he was only left with one breath. After barging into that place, no matter how powerful he was, I'm afraid it would be difficult for him to survive." "But when I said that he would die a glorious death, why did you say maybe?" The silver-armored thousand soldier tilted his head and stared at him. Even though he was injured to this extent, You still don't dare to believe that he will die? Previously, I thought that he would definitely die, but later, after the Holy Maiden returned from the human world, I accidentally thought of asking the Holy Maiden to perform a divination for that person, to see if he was dead or alive. Chapter 1003. Saintess. Silver Armor Soldier was surprised. Could it be that the Saintess has deduced that the person is not dead? No. The scholar's expression showed a hint of helplessness as he focused on the tip of the brush. The Saintess refused to deduce this person, so I can't force her. Don't you think this is strange? If that person is dead, why would she refuse to deduce? The realm that the Saintess returned to is the realm where that person is. Maybe the Saintess already has an idea about that person. The pavilion fell into silence. Silver Armor Soldier couldn't say much about the Saintess, but his expression became serious as he felt that something was strange. The scholar seemed to have entered the state of painting. He lifted the brush and dipped it into the ink. His brush was like moving clouds and flowing water. The content of the painting was progressing more and more smoothly. However, just as the brush was about to move, the scholar suddenly froze. The tip of the brush stopped for a long time. The Silver Armor army of 1,000 soldiers had been staring at the tip of the brush, deep in thought. When the tip of the brush paused, he immediately came back to his senses. He looked at the scholar, only to see the scholar lifting the brush hesitantly. His brows were slightly furrowed, as though he had noticed something. Silver Armor Soldier couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" The brush was picked up by the slender and fair fingers and placed upside down on the brush rack. The elegant and noble scholar in white slowly raised his head. His deep eyes, which seemed to be able to see through everything, looked out of the window through the forest and into the distant night sky. His gaze looked gentle and had a cultured and refined aura. However, upon closer inspection, there was an unconcealable majesty and indifference. It was shocking. The scholar's slightly closed lips slowly opened and said indifferently, "It's the Dragon Transformation Sect." Dragon Transformation Sect? Silver Armor Soldier was startled. He didn't notice anything strange and looked out the window. Are we going to summon the Nether River Black Carps to leap through the Dragon Gate again? It should be. I haven't seen it for a long time. I wonder if any Nether River Black Carp will obtain the great opportunity to transform into a dragon. The scholar turned to Silver Armor Soldier and smiled. This is a rare opportunity. We can't miss it. Shall we go take a look? There was no need to say anything. The two of them had known each other for many years and could understand each other with just a look. The two of them turned into a streak of white light and silently passed through the window. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the endless night sky one after the other. Several fireflies that were climbing upside down on the roof of the attic to illuminate the place immediately fell down, flapped their wings and flew out of the window. Through the window, the attic immediately became pitch black. In the sky above the Dragon Transformation Sect, the 10 over purple lightning were still spinning like a top, giving people a dazzling and blurry feeling. However, it caused the people below to willingly watch without blinking. Hiding behind Yu Qianqiu, little Yuan, who was grabbing his robe with his small hands, also stuck out his head and stared at the sky without blinking. However, Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable all over. The two little hands were tugging at his clothes from behind. It felt like there were two weights hanging on his clothes. The collar of his clothes was being strangled by the little fellow behind him. It was abnormally awkward. Damn it. Why are you so nervous? Yu Qianqiu could feel little Yuan's grip getting tighter and tighter. His neck was also getting tighter and tighter. He was speechless and wanted to pull the little fellow to the front. However, the other's awesome parents, brothers and sisters were all present. He had no choice but to restrain himself. He twisted his strangely uncomfortable neck, and when he swept his gaze across his surroundings, he was suddenly stunned. In the distant water region with the Dragon Transformation Sect as the center, a large group of messy people had silently appeared without a sound. The vision of the underworld was not very good. With his cultivation, if he did not pay attention, he would have missed them. Looking around, he could vaguely see that the people around him were all standing on the waves, and all of them were in an imposing manner. Some were standing with their arms crossed valiantly, while others had their hands behind their backs proudly. There was a distance between them and very few of them were standing close to each other. It seemed like they were not the same group of people. From the different clothes they were wearing, it was clear that they were not people of the Li Palace. Old Song, don't just look up. Look at the people around you. Who are they? When Song Yunxin heard Yu Qianqiu's message, he subconsciously looked around. He would not have known if he did not look, but when he did, he was shocked. His eyes flickered for a long time before he replied, "Those that I can see clearly have a cultivation of at least the early stage of the Underworld Emperor. I can see those that are too far away, but I cannot see their cultivation. However, their cultivation should not be low. As for who they are, I have not seen any of them. They should all be experts of the underworld." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was slightly shocked. Looking at the indistinct figures in the distance, there were at least 800 people. Could they all be experts of the Underworld Emperor level? He asked Xinyu in disbelief. "Xinyu, look around and see who those people are." Xinyu turned his head and glanced at him. When he saw the strange sight of the fourth prince of the Li Palace grabbing his clothes and strangling him, he couldn't help but find it funny. But when he looked around, his smile instantly vanished. His eyes scanned the area and he gasped in shock. They're all experts of the water tribe of the Underworld River. Their status in the water tribe is roughly the same as Li Guang's, but there are some who are even stronger. They should all be here to watch the Underworld River Black Carp race leap through the Dragon Gate. Yu Qianzhou immediately looked around again, wanting to memorize the appearances of the experts of the Underworld River's water tribe. Perhaps he would be able to use them when he had dealings with them in the future. But given his cultivation and the poor eyesight in the underworld, he could not see clearly even a little further. It was truly a pity. But what he did not know was that he and Sangyun Xan, two people of the immortal realm, had mingled with Li Guang's children in front of him, attracting the attention of many people. Especially Sangyun Xan's mid-stage immortal emperor cultivation and his own unfathomable cultivation. Quite a few experts of the Underworld River's water tribe secretly memorized their appearances. Most likely, even Sangyun Xan himself hadn't expected this. He had come to the netherworld with Yu Qianzhou while suppressing his resentment. However, he had made the mysterious experts of the Netherworld River's water race remember him. With a loud rumble, a purple thunderbolt suddenly burst out from the purple halo and once again struck the Dragon Transformation Gate. The violet lightning swam through the Dragon Transformation Gate, and an ancient and majestic chi once more rippled through the surroundings. The violet halo in the sky suddenly expanded, its radiance growing even more dazzling. "It's here." No one knew who suddenly let out a cry of surprise, but everyone's gazes immediately focused on the sky. Amidst the purple halo, a dazzling starlight shone and drilled out. The dazzling dot of starlight grew larger and larger as it leisurely rushed over from the sky. "What is this thing?" Yu Qianzhou's voice suddenly appeared in the quiet surroundings. Yu Qianzhou looked at the sky in shock and pulled on Sangyun Xan's sleeve, completely unaware of how much of a wet blanket he was. "How would I know?" Sangyun Xan looked at him like he was looking at an idiot, and flicked his sleeve, telling him not to disturb him. In reality, Yu Qianzhou had only subconsciously asked, and his attention had already been attracted by the dot of starlight. Even though he had asked Sangyun Xan, he did not listen to Sangyun Xan's reply, as if he had no intention of disturbing Sangyun Xan. Sangyun Xan resentfully turned his head to look at the sky. Fortunately, everyone's attention was on the sky, and no one was willing to pay attention to these two fellas. The dazzling dot of starlight got closer and closer, and everyone could already see the outline of the dot of starlight. Within the glass-like glow, there was a carriage that flew over. There was nothing special about the carriage. It was an open carriage that looked like bronze, and there was a bent umbrella handle at the back. The roof of the carriage was supported by a canopy, and together with the wheels of the carriage, the entire carriage seemed to be made of bronze. What surprised everyone was that the two steeds that were pulling the carriage looked sturdy, but their bodies were as transparent as crystal. There was no flesh or blood in their bodies, and they were crystal clear as if they were made of glass. The two transparent steeds galloped in the air, and the crystal silk-like mane on their necks and backs fluttered in the wind. They could be said to be divine and extraordinary. As the carriage got closer, they could see the ancient cloud patterns on the carriage, but the carriage was empty. The two transparent steeds pulled the empty carriage, and after descending above the Dragon Transformation Gate, they spread out their hooves, and with the Dragon Transformation Gate as the center, they galloped in a circle. Under the envelopment of the glass-like glow, the entire carriage was so mysterious, and it made people feel that it was so magical, so unbelievable. "Oh my! What is the meaning of this?" Yu Qianzhou's eyeballs followed the carriage in a circle, and he muttered in a silly manner. Sangyun Xan also sighed with emotion. If it was said that he was stifled before, now he felt that this trip was worth it, and he had broadened his horizons. "Nay, nay." The two steeds suddenly let out a long neigh that pierced through the night sky, and under everyone's gaze, their beautiful manes fluttered in the wind as they turned around and slowly descended on the dragon transformation gate. After taking a few steps on the mountain peak, the clear sound of horse hooves could be heard, and the two transparent steeds sneezed a few times before stopping. Just at this moment, the glass-like glow that enveloped the carriage suddenly exploded with light, and illuminated the entire night sky, causing everyone to not dare to open their eyes. When the light weakened and everyone opened their eyes, they saw that the glass-like glow on the carriage had already enveloped the entire dragon transformation gate. The 100-meter-tall mountain that towered over the underworld river emitted a glass-like glow, and everyone could clearly see every corner of the mountain. It was abnormally dazzling and people could not help but sigh in admiration. This was truly worthy of being the legendary dragon transformation gate. Pa. Two whips sounded out, and after the two vanguards of the Li Palace waved their braids, the Li Guang couple had already flashed to the surface of the water, and the couple unhesitatingly knelt on the surface of the water. As the couple knelt, all the members of the Li Palace, from top to bottom, knelt towards the dragon transformation gate. Even Xiao Yuan, who was behind Yu Qianqiu, sensibly flashed out, and joined his brothers and sisters in kneeling down. Under the lead of the couple, all the members of the Li Palace respectfully and devoutly began to kowtow 3 times and kowtow 9 times on the surface of the underworld river. Chapter 1004. At this moment, all eyes were focused on this sacred and solemn scene. Other than the members of the Underworld River's water tribe standing on the surface of the Underworld River, there were also quite a few experts hidden in the darkness watching this scene from the dark night sky. Everyone might argue or fight over other matters, but today the main character of this scene belonged to the Li Palace Black Carp clan of the water tribe of the Underworld River. No one dared to raise their glory, because this was the glory that the ancestors of the Underworld River Black Carp clan had exchanged for with endless blood, tears and suffering. It was a glory that would benefit their descendants for generations to come. The ancient dragon gate that stood in the middle of the Underworld River, the Pegasus that pierced through the sky, all of them spoke of the vicissitudes of history that had passed countless years ago. As the descendants of the later generations, they had no way to repay the kindness that their ancestors had accumulated through blood and tears. They could only worship with excitement and piety. As someone who did not know of this past event, Yu Qianqiu only felt that this group of people were really boring. Wasn't it just a carriage that pierced through the sky? Was there a need to pay such great respects? While he was disdainful, he was also somewhat glad that he had finally gotten rid of that unlucky child. He loosened the lapels of his clothes and pulled them up, feeling much more comfortable. But what made him not know whether to laugh or cry was that after this group of water tribe members paid their respects and stood up, little Yuan once again rushed over, his small face flushed with excitement. He once again tightly grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's robes, as if he was afraid that he would run away. His robes had been pulled askew again. This was really damaging to his image. There were also beauties present. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He secretly tried to pull back, but little Yuan refused to let go as if he had his eyes set on him. Helpless, Yu Qianqiu could only let him do as he pleased. Because at this moment, Li Guang's tiger eyes were wide open and he was excitedly sweeping his gaze over his subjects. It was not convenient for Yu Qianqiu to let him see that he was bullying his son. His hand that was secretly trying to snatch little Yuan's robes loosened, and the collar of his robes tightened around his neck again. Other than fuck, Yu Qianqiu had no words to describe his current mood. The grace of our ancestors extends to our descendants for generations to come. Since ancient times, we must not neglect the kindness of our ancestors. We must follow it from generation to generation. Li Guang's agitated voice rang out, his tiger-like eyes glowing red from excitement. He looked around at the members of the Li Palace and said, "I, the Black Carp race of the Nether River, await your instruction." As long as they had tried it the last time, they would avoid it. Those who hadn't tried it before but felt that they had the strength to do so, could give it a try. However, the ancient teachings must be kept in mind. After this attempt, if you fail, you will lose the chance to try again. Please consider for yourself whether or not you should wait for the next time to try again. With that said, he waved his hand. Papa. 2 whipping sounds immediately rang out, and a large area of water around the dragon transformation sect immediately became strange. The water waves stirred and countless Nether River black carps swam from the bottom of the water to the surface. Their dorsal fins and tails were everywhere moving on the water surface. All eyes were focused on this area of water. Many of the Nether River black carps hesitated for a while. Many of the smaller ones, perhaps feeling that they did not have the confidence to leap over the dragon gate, calmly sank back into the water after their excitement. These were the majority. There were still several hundred left, but all of them were at least 5 or 6 meters long. Just their backs that stuck out of the water was a long line. At this moment, the side of the dragon transformation sect facing Li Guang and his wife was also the side Yu Qianqiu and the others were standing on. The several hundred massive nether river black carps suddenly parted, their enormous backs sticking out of the water forming 2 long lines, leaving a 10-some meter wide channel in the middle. The black carp at the very end swam out of the formation, and quickly swam to the front of the channel. It turned around, paused in the water and suddenly broke through the waves like a shuttle. In an instant, it was dozens of meters away from the dragon transformation sect. With a schwa sound, its 5-meter-long body fiercely shot out of the water, and with a slight angle, it directly shot towards the dragon gate. This action, not only Li Guang and the other water races, even the usually indifferent Yu Qianqiu became worried. He hoped that this black carp would leap over the dragon transformation sect, and then witness the legendary scene of transforming into a dragon. Even Xiao Yuan, who was behind him, excitedly grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's robe. Yu Qianqiu immediately cursed his ancestors in his heart. His neck being strangled was a small matter, but having his clothes torn in front of everyone was too unsightly. However, it was not good to scold him, much less use his hands or feet to kick him. His sullen waist slowly bent as his clothes were pulled. That black carp that was swimming towards the glazed light that enveloped the entire dragon transformation sect seemed to be swimming against the current of a waterfall, its body agilely swaying in the light as it swam upwards. Yet, when it was not even halfway up the river, its speed of ascension became slower and slower. Its body began to move more and more rapidly, as if it wanted to swim upwards with all its might. However, after advancing 2 or 3 meters, it was unable to advance any further. After a stalemate in the light for a while, it finally regretfully fell down. Amidst the sounds of regret, its enormous body smashed into the surface of the nether river with a dong sound, and disappeared into the water, never to come out again. At this time, anyone could see that the biggest reason why the dragon gate was difficult to leap over was probably because of the glazed light coming from the carriage standing on the mountain top. Thinking about how the carriage was able to break through the air, the glazed light on its body was definitely not ordinary. It was natural that it was difficult to break through. Among the 2 groups of nether river black carps on the surface of the water, several dozen suddenly quietly disappeared into the water, no longer appearing. Presumably, these several dozen were estimating that their strength was about the same as the one that had just taken the lead. After weighing their strength, they felt that there was no need to make a pointless attempt. It was better to wait until their strength increased, and then calmly wait for the next dragon gate call to try their skills. This empty Pegasus carriage, I wonder who will be lucky enough to sit on it, and who will be able to transform into a dragon and soar through the air? The one speaking was a woman. It was the second princess of the Li Palace, standing in front of Yu Qianqiu. When these words were spoken, the gazes of the brothers and sisters all fell on the quiet, empty carriage at the top of the mountain, each of them revealing an expression of envy. Only the third princess, who had appeared first, still had a calm and indifferent expression, as if she was not too interested in the matter of leaping over the dragon gate. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xang glanced at each other, both revealing an expression of sudden understanding. They had previously been wondering why the Pegasus carriage had made such a big scene, pulling an empty carriage through the air. It turned out that only after leaping over the dragon gate and transforming into a dragon would a black carp have the right to ride the Pegasus carriage through the air. Grey Cloud Xing's gaze then froze. Only now did he realize that Yu Qianqiu was standing there with his shoulders crooked like a loafer. When he saw little Yuan, who was tugging at his clothes, he immediately gave Yu Qianqiu an expression of schadenfreude. You deserve it. At this time, the people of the hidden Dragon Mountain Villa in the distance, after witnessing the miraculous scene of the Pegasus carriage descending, were truly shocked. Unfortunately, because they were afraid of causing trouble, they had stayed a little too far away. They could not see the scene clearly, let alone hear what the people there were saying. From time to time, the gazes of the group would turn towards Grey Cloud Xan and Yu Qianqiu, who were still standing among the people of the River Styx's water race. They could not help but admire the extraordinary courage of these two. It was truly a great pity that they could not stand close enough to clearly see such a spectacle. But now they did not have the courage to approach again. Not to mention the numerous experts of the River Styx's water race on the surface of the water, even in the sky they could vaguely see experts hiding. Occasionally they would even glance at them with unfriendly gazes. It's a pity that before father left, he said that as the royalty of the river Styx's black carp, we have to give way to our clansmen when it comes to matters of right and wrong. We can only be ranked last. The first princess sighed slightly, her expression somewhat unwilling. That's right. The second princess also sighed slightly. It's a pity that every time the Pegasus carriage descends, it will only take away one of our clansmen who has leaped into the Dragon Gate. We don't know when the next time will be. I heard that there was once a clansman who succeeded in leaping into the Dragon Gate before our royal family. In the end, we, the members of the royal family, did not even have the chance to try. Yu Qianqiu and Sang Yun, whose shoulders were tilted and whose movements were strange, looked at each other with confidence. The two of them exchanged glances, thinking that they had learned another secret. It turned out that the Pegasus carriage would only take away one person who succeeded in leaping into the Dragon Gate each time. The great crown prince of Li Palace, who stood at the head of the group, slowly turned his head and glanced at his two younger sisters. He coldly snorted and said, "It seems that my two younger sisters are certain of victory in this Dragon Gate leap. Since you're confident, you can charge out and try. Once you leap into the Dragon Gate, not even father can stop you. I'm afraid that you're still worried that you won't succeed and will be severely punished by father afterwards." His tone was somewhat unkind. The first princess immediately retorted, "From what eldest brother says, you seem to be more confident than we are. Then why don't you do as you say and charge out and set an example for us?" She then changed the topic and said, "Second brother, third brother, don't you think what I said makes sense?" Yu Qianqiu instantly tilted his shoulders in amusement. He didn't think that the royal family of the water tribe was not inferior to the royal family of the human realm. Even siblings were scheming against each other. Just as he was wondering if these unfilial children of his would do something out of line, he suddenly realized that his siblings were all as quiet as cicadas in winter. He instinctively turned his head to look, and sure enough, Li Guang was already glaring at them angrily. At this moment, one of the 2 rows of black carps on the surface of the river Styx had already come out to make its preparations. After a moment of preparation, it broke through the waves with a whoosh, its speed far faster than the previous one. Before it even reached the foot of the mountain, there was a splash as a giant black carp, 7 to 8 meters in size, shot out. Piercing through the glazed light, it instantly covered half of the distance to the 100-meter mountain. Once it slowed down, its body quickly twisted like a migrating fish swimming against the current of a waterfall. Very quickly, it rose another 20 meters, and was only 20 meters away from its destination. What was most worrying was that its momentum was still not exhausted. Its enormous body was rapidly moving, and it continued to advance meter by meter. Beautiful. Yu Qianqiu's mouth was agape, and he was just short of applauding and cheering. In any case, to him, it didn't matter who transformed into the Dragon Gate. It had nothing to do with him. However, its shoulders tilted even more and its clothes were stretched taut. The little fellow behind it was indeed a little too excited. Chapter 1005. Why was he so excited? Yu Qianqiu could tell from the strength and rhythm of the kid's tugging that it was as if he wasn't tugging at his clothes, but the fish tail that was trying its best to reach him. It was as if he wanted to pull the other party down. His intentions were unfathomable. In the end, just as he wished, that netherworld river black carp couldn't move forward even an inch when it was only a dozen meters away from the top. Under the scouring of the treasured glaze light, its body slowly slid down. In the end, it gave up due to its lack of cultivation and fell down. With a bang, it made a regretful splash in the netherworld river. Amidst the cries of regret, Yu Qianqiu's hand that was holding onto Yu Qianqiu's back gradually loosened its grip. Everyone could now see that the colored glaze light enveloping the dragon transformation gate exerted greater pressure the closer one got to the top. It was difficult for those without great abilities to reach the top and become a dragon in one leap. This colored glaze light undoubtedly had a screening function. Not every nether river black carp could pass its test. Although this nether river black carp had failed, the fact that it was only a dozen meters away from the top made the other nether river black carps below excited. They all saw the hope of success. It still started from the back. A nether river black carp swam close to Li Guang. After making some preparations, it broke through the waves like an arrow released from a bow. As it neared the dragon transformation gate, it vigorously leapt up. Its 7 or 8 meter body was about the same size as the previous one, and its speed and strength were not any weaker. It resisted the enormous pressure exerted by the colored glaze light and soared up, fighting against fate. Damn it! It's here again? Yu Qianqiu felt like he was going to go crazy. Xiao Yuan's demonic claws were using the 1,000 catty drop on him again. He now hated himself for being so gluttonous that he had thrown out his pole to catch this demonic star to torture himself. People said that one would stink if they didn't eat mutton. He was a Nether River black carp who didn't eat mutton and got stink. Coming to the Netherworld was truly retribution. Looking at the surface of the Nether River, there were still more than 200 Nether River black carps lining up to leap through the dragon transformation gate. These 200. I can't take it anymore, I can't take it anymore. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept around, finally landing on the Li Palace's third princess who happened to be standing right in front of him. Recalling the scene of him grabbing that rotten little child and asking for his sister to save him, his eyes instantly lit up. There was no doubt that the third princess still had a place in the fourth prince's heart, so he should be able to discipline her. Third princess. Here behind you. Hee. The Li Palace's third princess, who was currently looking up at the black carp leaping through the dragon gate, heard someone's voice and looked left and right. When he finally turned around, he immediately saw Yu Qianqiu smiling bitterly at him. Yu Qianqiu stood there with his body askew. His movements were abnormally awkward because his robe was being pulled by his younger brother. The third princess immediately turned around and nodded apologetically at Yu Qianqiu. She then glared at her brother who was staring at the dragon transformation sect and whispered, "Little Yuan, don't be rude." Xiao Yuan looked at his sister blankly, not knowing where he had gone wrong. The third princess could only glare at him and personally pull away Xiao Yuan's hand that was tugging on Yu Qianqiu's robe. I finally escaped from this unlucky child's clutches. Yu Qianqiu smiled at the third princess in a refreshed and gentlemanly manner, casually tidying up his robe that was a complete mess. The third princess pulled Xiao Yuan's hand, frowned and reprimanded him in a low voice, "Stand in front of me. No, I want to be with brother Yu." Xiao Yuan's attitude was very stubborn, as if he was determined to be with him for the rest of his life. His other hand once again grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's robe. Yu Qianqiu was not prepared at all and stumbled from the tug. His expression twitched and he looked innocently at the third princess as if saying, "Big sister, please discipline me." The third princess felt extremely apologetic for her brother's rash actions and shyly bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Anger flashed across her face as she said in a low voice, "Be obedient and stand in front of me." No. Xiao Yuan hugged Yu Qianqiu's arm with one arm. The commotion caused by the two sisters attracted the attention of the brothers and sisters in front of them. Even Li Guang and his wife glared at them, as if reprimanding the siblings for still being in the mood to play at a time like this. It was simply too outrageous. The third princess was suffering in silence and could only glare at her brother angrily. However, it was not convenient for her to continue tugging and pulling, so she took Xiao Yuan's hand and stood beside him. Beside them, Sangyun Xang glanced sideways at Yu Qianqiu, the corners of his mouth curling into a mocking smile. Yu Qianqiu looked at Xiao Yuan who was tugging at him, and suddenly had a very strange feeling. There was a child standing between the man and woman. Why did it feel like? Raising his head, he coincidentally bumped into the third princess, who was looking up at the same time. The two froze at the same time, both faintly feeling that they were thinking of the same thing. Yu Qianqiu was very good at concealing his thoughts. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth, as if to prove that he was very pure and had not let his thoughts run wild. But the third princess averted her gaze, a blush rising to her face as she quickly turned her head away. With a bang, the Netherworld River black carp followed in its footsteps. Just like the previous one, it failed on the verge of success when it was only 10 some meters away from the top. Soon after, 3 or 4 Nether River black carps, which were also 7 or 8 meters in size, attempted to leap over the dragon gate, but all of them failed when they were only 10 meters away from the peak. This short distance of 10 meters seemed like an insurmountable moat, causing the Li Palace's members to sigh in regret. Just as these Netherworld River black carps failed, over 100 similar Netherworld River black carps quietly disappeared from the 2 lines on the surface of the Netherworld River. It was obvious that they had retreated in the face of difficulties. In truth, this was a wise move. Retreating in the face of difficulties and waiting for an opportunity to try again might give them a greater chance of success. However, no one dared to guarantee when the next opportunity would appear. This was also the main reason why everyone was so anxious to try when an opportunity presented itself. At this moment, there were only 100 or so black carps left on the surface of the river, and they were naturally all of extraordinary strength. Strangely, their formation had fallen into disarray. The school of black carps had gathered together, as if discussing something. Not long after, the princes and princesses standing in front of Yu Qianqiu all paled. The first princess said in a low voice, "Not good, the Prime Minister is about to act." The school of Netherworld River Black Carps retreated to the side, leaving behind the largest Netherworld River Black Carp that slowly swam in front of Li Guang. Li Guang gave a slight nod as if silently agreeing to something. Only then did the black carp turn around and begin its preparations. A moment later, a dorsal fin noiselessly swept across the surface of the water. As soon as it reached the bottom of the dragon transformation gate, a huge black carp over 20 meters long charged straight into the colored glass light. It quickly soared to a height of 60 to 70 meters, then began its second wave of strength. In an instant, it had reached a height of 80 meters, but its momentum did not stop there, and it directly broke through the height of 90 meters. Good. Li Guang yelled and excitedly clapped his hands. Everyone stared nervously at the giant figure, watching it approach the peak bit by bit. Although its speed was getting slower and slower, the frequency of its head and tail swaying was getting faster and faster. It was getting closer and closer, meter by meter. When they were less than 5 meters away from the top of the mountain, the two Pegasi that were dragging the carriage on the top of the mountain suddenly leaped up and stood up on their hind legs. They shook their crystal silky manes and let out a long neigh. The colored glass light that enveloped the entire mountain suddenly overflowed with flowing light and became denser. The huge Netherworld River Black Carp's body paused in the colored glass light, and it even showed signs of slowly pressing down. However, the Prime Minister, who could make the princes and princesses change their expressions, was obviously not an ordinary Netherworld River Black Carp's strength. It slowly swayed its head and tail again, and its dark scales suddenly erupted with a dark light. It resisted the colored glass light and slowly climbed up again. There was only 4 meters left, 3 meters, 2 meters left. Everyone held their breaths and focused, witnessing the miracle that was about to happen. The two Pegasi on the peak also lowered their heads and looked at him. The distance between them was only 2 meters, but it was this distance that the Prime Minister actually stopped and could not advance any further. All the Netherworld River Black Carps felt their hearts leap to their throats. There were only 2 meters left. The Pegasi were already very close. Ah! The Prime Minister suddenly let out a muffled groan of pain. His body, which was frozen in the glazed light, began to tremble, and one of the large black scales on his body suddenly fell off and was sent flying by the glazed light. From this, one could see just how much pressure he was under. All the members of the Li Palace's water tribe paled. But this was only the first scale. As he continued to remain in a stalemate, a second scale slowly fell off and was sent flying, then a third, a fourth. In a few moments, 10 odd scales fell off one after another and dark blood began to seep out. But the moment the blood appeared, it was immediately vaporized by the colored glass light. Those who did not know what was going on were momentarily stunned. It turned out that not only could this colored glass light exert immense pressure, it was also abnormally hot. Just when more than half of the scales on his body had fallen off, the trembling Prime Minister suddenly let out another groan of pain. This heavy groan of pain echoed through the pitch-black sky. His body exploded with a dense black light. His head and tail began to slowly sway back and forth as his body began to rise once more. 1 meter. Just when his massive head was about to reach the peak of the mountain, good. Cheers of success erupted from below. Suddenly, the Prime Minister's head tilted to the side and his eyes lost their light. Starting from his gigantic head, cracks began to appear, and his body immediately lost its mobility. As he fell, his gigantic body, which was more than 20 meters long, began to break into pieces. His bones and flesh flew out and scattered all over the place. The crowd could only watch as he was transformed into flying ash by the colored glass light, annihilated, until not even a speck of his remains remained. Prime Minister! Li Guang cried out in alarm. All the members of the Li Palace's water tribe were speechless. The various water tribe experts watching from a distance all sighed and sighed. This Prime Minister of the Li Palace was far too eager to show off. He had already surpassed the limits of his strength, so why did he need to put on a brave front and throw away his life? Chapter 1006. Dead. Yu Qianqiu speechlessly looked at the sorrowful Li Palace water tribe. In his last life he had heard of the carp leaping over the dragon. It seemed like a very cool legend, but he didn't think that such a cool thing would also have life-threatening dangers. TSK. As he sighed, Yu Qianqiu felt the small hand holding his arm tremble. Looking at little Yuan who had his head lowered, he guessed that she had been frightened. Even with the Prime Minister's early-stage underworld emperor cultivation? Then with our cultivation, how can we succeed? The first princess at the front said somewhat dejectedly. Her previous chances of success had already disappeared. Legend has it that the ancestors of my Styx Black Carp clan who transformed into a dragon all succeeded after forming good karma with others. The crown prince sighed lightly. Is it really like this? And what is this so-called good karma? When the crown princes and princesses heard this, they frowned in thought. When Xiao Yuan heard this, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu. However, Yu Qianqiu was currently raising his head and taking the time to appreciate the two celestial horses that were standing on top of the dragon transformation gate. He wondered how there could be transparent horses in this world, and where exactly did these two horses come from. He was completely unaware that little Yuan, who had just suffered a blow, was currently looking at him with stars in her eyes. Who else wants to try? Li Guang stood back on top of the one-horned water rhinoceros. Looking around at the water tribe under his command, he said in a sorrowful tone, anyone can try, I won't stop you. But everyone saw what happened to the Prime Minister. I hope that everyone will act within their abilities and not be impulsive. Who else wants to try? The nearly 100 Nether River black carps that had revealed their true forms slowly sank back into the water. None of them had a higher cultivation than the great Prime Minister, and the majority of those that were stronger than the great Prime Minister had wasted their opportunity to leap through the Dragon Gate. Most of them had also not come and were guarding the Li Palace. When they were discussing before, they didn't want to make any pointless attempts and waste an opportunity, cutting off the possibility of success in the future. Therefore they recommended the Prime Minister who had the highest cultivation base. But who would have thought that the Prime Minister was so strong? Not only did he not succeed, he even lost his life. After witnessing such a tragic situation, which of these people, whose cultivation was lower than the Prime Minister's, would dare to take the risk? He could only watch from afar and shrink back. The crown princes and princesses, who had been eager to give it a try at first, were now all ashen-faced. No one said anything about the imperial family anymore. They realized that in the face of life and death, everyone was equal. Hee. Li Guang stood on the horned water rhinoceros and shook his head with a bitter smile. It seems like my Nether River Black Carp clan will have to let down the efforts of our ancestors this time. Never mind. Prepare to send off the Pegasus. At this moment, little Yuan, who had been blinking his big eyes, finally could not hold it in any longer. Hearing that his father wanted to end this Dragon Gate leap, his childish voice immediately rang out in the night sky, interrupting Li Guang's words, Father, I'm willing to try. The consequences of these words could be imagined. The water tribe experts who had been preparing to leave after seeing the Pegasus return froze, and the experts hidden in the air also froze. The crown princes and princesses of the Li Palace in front all turned their heads. Everyone's eyes were focused on little Yuan, who had a ponytail, a golden chain around his neck and a black doo-doo. The experts in the distant waters immediately laughed, and someone even loudly said, Li Guang, this should be your little son who still smells of his mother's milk. His courage is truly commendable. The people around him roared with laughter. This kid has gone crazy. I don't know who didn't watch him well enough to let him escape. Even his brothers and sisters were complaining, blaming him for making everyone lose face. The third princess angrily pulled on little Yuan and reprimanded, Little Yuan, what nonsense are you talking about? After a while, Li Guang and his wife looked at each other, then Li Guang shouted, How improper! I'll take care of you when we get back. Father, didn't the ancient teachings of my Nether River Black Carp clan say, any disciple of my Nether River Black Carp clan can try, no one is allowed to stop them? Little Yuan indignantly argued, Little Yuan is also a disciple of the Nether River Black Carp clan, so why can't I try? As a child, he had no idea of his parents' painstaking efforts. It wasn't that his parents wanted to stop him, but that they knew that with his current cultivation, it was simply impossible for him to make the dragon leap, so they didn't want him to waste this chance. Once he grew up and his cultivation reached a certain level, his parents naturally wouldn't stop him anymore. For a moment, Li Guang was at a loss for words. It must be known that no matter how great Li Guang was, he couldn't surpass the teachings of his ancestors, and he didn't dare to openly oppose them. The empress standing next to Li Guang immediately frowned and waved her hand saying, Little Yuan, what are you doing? Come here, come to mother's side. The third princess immediately grabbed little Yuan's arm, wanting to drag him to her mother's side so that he wouldn't embarrass himself here. This unlucky child could finally get out of here. Yu Qianqiu did his best to turn his head to the side, suppressing his laughter so that it wouldn't look good in front of the Li Palace's water tribe. However, his snickering appearance was no different from that of an old fox that had stolen a chicken. To the side, Sangyun Xen also shook his head with a smile, lamenting that a newborn calf really wasn't afraid of a tiger, always doing things that made people laugh their teeth off. Brother Yu, have you forgotten that you said you would help me? Yu Qianqiu instantly couldn't laugh anymore. He felt his arm tighten and slowly turned his head around. He saw that the third princess was pulling little Yuan, while little Yuan was tugging at his sleeve, looking at him pitifully. He immediately pulled at his sleeve guiltily, but it wasn't good to be violent in front of his parents. For a moment he couldn't break free, so he awkwardly said, "You must have remembered wrongly. When did I ever say I would help you? Be good. Hurry and go to your mother's side." The third princess was also angry, her pretty face turning frosty as she said, "Little Yuan, be good." As she spoke, she was about to forcefully take little Yuan away. "No." Little Yuan stubbornly shook his head and stared at Yu Qianqiu with infinite grievance. "Brother Yu, you said you had a way to help me make the dragon leap. Could it be that you were lying to little Yuan?" With these words, the third princess' hand, which was about to use force, froze. She raised her head in shock to look at Yu Qianqiu. It wasn't just her. Everyone's eyes were on Yu Qianqiu. The white-clothed scholar, who was hidden in the darkness, was mostly focused on the Pegasus carriage of the dragon transformation sect. Nothing else could attract his attention. At this moment, the silver-armored soldier next to him suddenly exclaimed, "Who is this person? I can't even see through his cultivation. When did the immortal realm have such a powerful person?" "Which one?" the scholar asked faintly and looked in the direction that the silver-armored soldier was pointing at. His pupils suddenly shrank and a faint white light appeared in his eyes. When the white light disappeared, he heaved a sigh of relief. He must have used some special camouflage technique. In fact, he is only at the early minor immortal stage. He is just a pawn that has just stepped into the immortal gate. There is no need to make a fuss. So that's how it is. The silver-armored soldier nodded slowly. His gaze more or less focused on Sangyun Xan. He was a little surprised by his intermediate immortal emperor cultivation. He muttered, "That's the attire of the Heartless Palace. It's not the Heartless Palace. Could it be the chief consecrator, Sangyun Xen?" After a short pause, his gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu again. He nodded with some understanding. "The early minor immortal stage. I know who this person is. He should be the World Commerce Chamber's sect leader Yu Qianqiu, who is causing trouble in the immortal realm." "Oh, the Yu Qianqiu who Lord Jin ordered to compose?" The scholar's gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu again. At this time he showed some interest. If Yu Qianqiu knew that this person had also heard of his great name, he wondered if he would feel honored. "Damn it. Why are you all staring at me?" Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. Back then it was just a trick he had casually used to trick a child. What he said was over and he did not take it to heart. In fact, he did not have any way to help him leap through the dragon gate. He thought he was just a child. He could have just fooled him for a while. Who knew that this stupid child would keep thinking about it? Yu Qianqiu now understood. No wonder this unlucky child kept pestering him. He really took what he said seriously. Seeing the surrounding gazes, he lowered his head and smiled awkwardly at little Yuan. "Little Yuan, you must have heard wrong. I only said that I hope you can leap through the dragon's gate. When did I say I had a way to help you leap through the dragon's gate? Hurry and go back to your mother. Listen to me." How could he dare to admit that he had used the pious worship of the Nether River Black Carp clan to fool someone, and the person he had fooled was the fourth prince of Li Palace? Sangyun Xen sneered and secretly transmitted his voice. "Now you know how to be afraid. What happened to the daring and magnificent feat at the beginning? You actually wanted to eat the fourth prince of Li Palace. You have guts." Xin Yu, who had been standing silently to the side, also looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. "Oh, no, you said it before." Little Yuan immediately began to sob. Letting go of his hand, he pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose and sobbed. "You said that you were called Yu Qianqiu, the Yu from leaping through the dragon's gate. You said that the two of us were fated and that I should call you Big Brother Yu." He then turned to Sangyun Xan and Xin Yu. They all heard it. They can testify that it was clearly Yu who used a fishing rod to. The word fishing rod caused Yu Qianqiu to stagger. He hurriedly took little Yuan from the third princess's hands and pressed little Yuan's head against his chest. He even pretended to gently stroke little Yuan's head to comfort him, coaxing, "Little Yuan, be good, don't cry, don't cry." In reality, he was pressing little Yuan's mouth against his chest to prevent him from continuing. But it was still a little too late. To the vast majority of the underworld river's water tribes, the word fishing rod was a word they abhorred, especially to a school of carp. At this moment, it was not only the Nether River Black Carp clan that had darkened their faces. Even quite a few of the experts of the underworld river's water tribes in the distance gradually became savage. Fishing rods, fishing nets, and the like were absolute humiliation to them, a very, very great humiliation. A normal person would avoid mentioning these words in front of them, but now, someone was using these things in the underworld river. Chapter 1007. Yu Qianqiu casually glanced at them a few times and felt too embarrassed to look again. He was very depressed in his heart. With his eyes, he could tell that he had angered everyone. It was supposed to be a good thing. It's all this unlucky child's fault. Yu Qianqiu's hand exerted a little more force and pressed little Yuan's head, which was about to raise, against his chest. He thought that it would be better to take this unlucky child as a hostage. It was better for him to leave first. After thinking about it, there was nothing for him to be afraid of. At most, he wouldn't be able to stay in the netherworld anymore. But it wasn't like there weren't any benefits. Grey Cloud Xan was dragged down by him. With so many experts around him, he would definitely die. How could Grey Cloud Xan not know his current situation? Looking at the atmosphere around him, he no longer had the mood to watch the show. He had already ravaged Yu Qianqiu 10,000 times in his heart, but it was still not enough. He felt that he was going to die because of Yu Qianqiu this time. He slowly hid his hands in his sleeves, ready to fight to the death. Beside him, Xinyu's face was pale. He had a premonition that he would be dragged into this. It would be hard for him not to die. The scholar, who was hiding in the air, curled the corners of his mouth into a smile. He stared at the scene below and said, "I'm afraid that the handsome talent that Jin Taishang had personally selected is going to die a violent death. I wonder how Jin Taishang will feel when he hears about this? When this matter reaches the immortal realm, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. I'm afraid that Jin Tai will feel embarrassed. When that happens, will he?" Silver Armor Soldier frowned at the scholar and said, "Will Jin Tai come to the netherworld to punish us?" "Punish us? That depends on who it is." The scholar's gaze swept across the water clan on the netherworld river and he laughed. "If he dares to come to punish us, I will open the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld and welcome him in. I will not interfere and will even provide him with all the conveniences. But I'm afraid he won't have the guts." "That's right." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers cast their gazes at the ancient Nether River, which was so long that they could not see the end of it. Standing on the back of the one-horned water rhinoceros, Li Guang and his wife's faces were ashen. They looked at Yu Qianqiu as if they wanted to skin him alive. Li Guang gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you dare to insult my son with a fishing rod. You should be hacked into pieces and your bones burned to ashes." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. He didn't like hearing that. The world was big, so what if he used a fishing rod? What's more, your son didn't do anything. What right do you have to cut me into 1,000 pieces and grind my bones to dust? However, even though he thought this way, he still had to think of a way to salvage the situation. Unless he really didn't want to stay in the netherworld anymore, he had to think of a way to salvage the situation. He coughed and said, "You've misunderstood me. I really didn't mean to insult your son. In fact, I didn't know he was your son. Just imagine, if your son were to reveal his true form and mingle with a school of underworld river black carps, how could someone like me who has never seen him before, know that he is the fourth prince of the Li Palace? Actually, release my fourth brother first." The crown prince of the Li Palace suddenly shouted angrily, interrupting, "My Li Palace imperial family is not something you can blaspheme." Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned his head and angrily shouted, "Who do you think you are? I am talking to your old man. When did it become your turn to interrupt? Could it be that the person in charge of the Li Palace isn't your father Li Guang, but you, the Crown Prince Li Zhong?" He was also a person with a reverse scale. How could a random person appear out of nowhere and yell at him? He immediately returned the favor. These words were vicious, and in the emperor's household, it would definitely be considered a death sentence. Crown Prince Li Zhong was almost speechless by these words, and his embarrassment turned into anger as he bared his teeth at his brothers and sisters. If we allow him to kidnap fourth brother and escape today, as his elder brothers and sisters, we will not have the face to see others in the future. Surround him, don't let him escape. After saying these words in front of everyone, the crown princes and princesses immediately surrounded Yu Qianqiu and the others. The third princess stood in front of Yu Qianqiu, coldly staring at him. Yu Qianqiu looked around and sneered, "A bunch of playthings from the same nest, do you think you're worthy of pretending to be brothers and sisters? I Yu Qianqiu am an indomitable spirit. I won't use a child as a hostage." As he spoke, he pushed Xiao Yuan, who was almost suffocating, into the arms of the third princess. The third princess was a little surprised, but she slowly carried Xiao Yuan out of the encirclement. Seeing that the other side had no hostages, Crown Prince Li Zhong suddenly laughed sinisterly. The underworld is not a place where people from the immortal realm can be arrogant. Old song. Yu Qianqiu directly ignored him and interrupted, "Some people don't know the immensity of heaven and earth just because they have the title of Crown Prince. We are sent here by the immortal emperor and represent the immortal emperor. How can we let others humiliate us? If anyone dares to spout nonsense again, why don't you let him have a taste of your heartless palace's 3 swords and 1 sword unsheathing form? Let's see if he's good with words or if he's really capable with his hands." Hearing this, the underworld's water tribe's powerhouses were slightly shocked. They might not have heard of who Cangyun Xen was, but they had definitely heard of the celestial world's heartless palace's sect master, Wang Qing, especially his 3 swords and 1 sword unsheathing form. In order to comprehend the sword technique, Wang Qing had once rampaged through the underworld. Many powerhouses had died under Wang Qing's 3 swords and 1 sword unsheathing form. None of them had the confidence to block this move. Hearing this, based on everyone's information, they could roughly confirm that these 2 fellows were indeed Heartless Palace's chief high priest Cangyun Xen and World Commerce's sect master Yu Qianqiu from the celestial world. In fact, Li Guang was also quite wary of Cangyun Xen's 3 swords and 1 sword unsheathing form. Otherwise he would have given the order to kill them already. When the crown princes and princesses heard the 3 swords and 1 sword unsheathing form, their expressions all changed. Cangyun Xen had no way out. Yu Qianqiu had even brought up the celestial emperor. Even if he had to die, he had to brace himself and fight. This might give him a sliver of a chance at survival. If he retreated, Celestial Emperor Jin Tai would be the first to come after him. He had no confidence in escaping Jin Tai's pursuit. He immediately stepped forward with an imposing manner and stared at Crown Prince Li Zhong like lightning. Crown Prince Li Zhong immediately felt a powerful pressure bearing down on him after being targeted by Cangyun Xen. He panicked. He had naturally heard of the Heartless Palace's sword unsheathing form, and he had no confidence in blocking it. Only now did he realize that he had indeed been impulsive. "Cangyun Xen!" Li Zhong shouted. "No matter how powerful Celestial Emperor Jin Tai is, he can't control the water tribe of the underworld. My Li Palace has never had any dealings with your Heartless Palace. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but it's best if you don't interfere in our affairs. Otherwise, no matter how famous your Heartless Palace's sword unsheathing form is, the water tribe of the underworld will not let you come and go as you please." These words were already a concession. It would be a lie if Cangyun Xen said that he wasn't tempted, but he knew that if he retreated now, Immortal Emperor Jin Tai would probably make his life a living hell. He had no choice but to say it out loud. Cangyun Xen slowly closed his eyes. His blue robe and long beard fluttered without any wind. His hands were hidden in his sleeves as he stood there with his eyes closed. At this moment, Cangyun Xen had the demeanor of Guan Yunchang. He stood there silently to show his attitude. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. No one dared to be the first to test the sharpness of his sword unsheathing form. Everyone knew that once the sword unsheathing form was used, the river Styx would be dyed red with blood. "Big brother, you said that you had a way to help me make the great leap." Little Yuan, who was in the third princess' hands, suddenly spoke in a childish voice. Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes. "This unlucky child, if it weren't for your blabbering, things would not have turned out like this." At this moment, Li Guang, who was in a difficult position, gritted his teeth and said, "Yu Qianqiu, did you say anything to my son about helping him make the great leap?" The various experts on the surface of the underworld looked at each other. They could all hear that Li Guang's words were a little soft, and they couldn't help but feel a little helpless. No one here had the confidence to resist the sharpness of the Heartless Palace's sword unsheathing form, and the true experts of the underworld river had yet to show themselves. Otherwise, how could they have been frightened by Cangyun Xen? Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned when he heard this. He immediately understood that the other party was giving him a way out of this embarrassing situation, and it was similarly giving him a way out of this embarrassing situation as well. If he didn't think of a way to salvage the situation, then both of them could only fight to the death. It's true that I said that, but there's a reason for it. Yu Qianqiu immediately explained with assurance. When I first arrived here, I suddenly saw a school of black carps in the river in front of me. One of them was faintly glowing. This glow was different from normal glows, as if it was possessed by a dragon. It was truly magical. I found it strange and wanted to see what it was. Thus, I took out a treasure that looked like a fishing rod and caught the thing that was possessed by the dragon. Who would have thought that it was actually the fourth prince of the Li Palace? Don't you think this is a huge misunderstanding? As soon as he said this, countless people silently cursed him for speaking nonsense, but no one pointed it out. They only heard Yu Qianqiu continue to ramble. When the fourth prince was caught by me, he felt extremely wronged. In order to comfort him, I told him that I had a way to help him make the great leap. Actually, it was just a way to coax a child. Who would have thought that he would take it seriously? I really didn't have the slightest intention of insulting the water tribe of the river Styx. I hope that your majesty will forgive my unintentional mistake. As he spoke, he cupped his hands. His attitude was very sincere. The surroundings were completely silent, and all eyes were on Li Guang. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Li Guang was about to go crazy. He thought to himself, you can just deny that you didn't do anything, and then I'll slowly investigate the truth. In the end, I'll just let it go. Now that you've come up with such a ridiculous reason, how am I supposed to get out of this situation? Don't even talk about fooling the adults with this reason. Little Yuan was the first to refuse and stubbornly shouted, no. Brother Yu, you definitely have a way. He then turned to Li Guang and shouted, Imperial Father, Little Yuan is also a member of the river Styx. According to the teachings of our ancestors, Little Yuan also has the right to attempt the Great Leap. Chapter 1008. He had spoiled this unlucky child to the point that even the adults were worried about him. Yu Qianqiu sighed and shook his head. Right now he was like a bystander who was watching the show. Actually, when Li Guang gave him a way out, it wasn't that he couldn't find a good reason with his mouth. In reality, when he saw how powerful Cangyun Xian was and how no one dared to touch him, he immediately became vigilant. He had originally wanted to find a chance to borrow someone's knife to kill Cangyun Xian after familiarizing himself with the Netherworld's environment. However, he didn't expect the Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique to be so powerful in the Netherworld. Who knew if anyone would dare to touch Cangyun Xian in the future? Thus, he suddenly had an evil thought and wanted to take this opportunity. However, he didn't want to cut off his future in the Netherworld. It was truly a difficult choice. Helplessly, he came up with a far-fetched reason and kicked the ball back to Li Guang. He was prepared to do whatever he wanted, but once he realized that the situation wasn't right, he would immediately dive into the water and escape. Let him go, let him try. Li Guang, who had nowhere to vent his anger, waved his hand. He was already having a headache, and this youngest son kept bringing up the ancestral teachings to pressure him. He had never seen such an unfilial son before. This was truly intolerable, so he decided to let him do as he pleased. The Empress was a little anxious, but seeing Li Guang like this, she wanted to say something but hesitated. In order to maintain his authority, she finally shut her mouth and didn't say anything. The third princess was still hesitating as she looked at her parents. However, Xiao Yuan got off her arm and ran toward Yu Qianqiu on the water. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The corner of his mouth twitched as he thought to himself, what are you doing here again? As everyone expected, Xiao Yuan passed through the crowd of his brothers and sisters and grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's sleeve. He pointed at the dragon transformation gate and said, help me. Yu Qianqiu looked at Xiao Yuan and shook his head. He had never seen such a stubborn child. To put it nicely, it was called stubborn. He suspected that this child was the illegitimate child of the deceased prime minister and the empress. Otherwise, why would his temper be so similar to that of the prime minister? Forget it. It's good that you give up on this idea so that I don't have to be the center of attention all the time. Yu Qianqiu shrugged helplessly at the crowd. It didn't matter. Just like that, he was dragged away by the persistent Xiao Yuan. Under everyone's gaze, the two of them arrived at the foot of the transforming dragon sect that was enveloped by the colored glass treasure light. One big and one small raised their heads and looked up. From their angle, they could no longer see the heavenly horse treasure carriage. But the way the two of them stood there, it was hard to believe that they weren't father and son. Jump. With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianqiu nodded towards the top of the mountain and said perfunctorily, He was ready to let the little guy fail and give up as soon as possible. Xiao Yuan looked up at him, her large eyes blinking excitedly. "Brother, you help me." "What a joke. I don't have that kind of ability." Looking at the colored glass treasure light, Yu Qianqiu was a bit scared. His mind was filled with the scene of the Prime Minister being annihilated. Even a guy with the cultivation of the early stage of the Underworld Emperor ended up like that. What kind of joke was he, who was in the early stage of the minor immortal realm, playing? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How do you want me to help?" Xiao Yuan bit his finger and looked back at the colored glass treasure light. After thinking for a while like an adult, he said, "Xiao Yuan's cultivation is too low. I can't go up." "Why don't?" He was very self-aware. He knew that his cultivation was too low to go up. After a pause, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and said expectantly, "Why don't you carry me up?" Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. He said in surprise, "Carry you up? Are you kidding me? This is the Jumping Dragon Gate. Have you ever heard of anyone from your Nether River Black Carp clan being carried up after jumping the Dragon Gate? If that's the case, how is it you jumping the Dragon Gate? Isn't it me jumping the Dragon Gate?" Let alone him, the surrounding people were also shaking their heads. They all thought to themselves that the little guy was just a little guy. Li Guang's originally green face turned a little black. This was too ridiculous. Xiao Yuan pouted and said very naively, "It was you, brother Yu, who told me. Your name is Yu Qianqiu, you as in Jumping Dragon Gate. There's nothing wrong with you bringing Xiao Yuan along to jump the Dragon Gate." Yu Qianqiu was stunned by this little guy's extraordinary comprehension ability. His mind went blank for a while. "You're my grandpa. So that's how you understand it. No matter what, it's just that I have a cheap mouth." This was the first time he realized that he had lost so badly in a verbal argument. Most importantly, there was no reason to reason with this little brat. He couldn't even be calculative with him. "Brother Yu, help me." Xiao Yuan tugged on his sleeve and acted like a spoiled child. He was practically invincible when it came to using both the carrot and the stick. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to beat up the little guy in front of so many people. He pointed at the colored glass treasure light in front of him and said, "You mean, you want me to carry you up the mountain from here?" "Yes." Xiao Yuan nodded excitedly, taking it as a yes. He dove into the river Styx and turned into a huge black carp about a meter long. He swam a few rounds around Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the surface of the water. Then he jumped out of the water and floated in front of Yu Qianqiu. He wagged his head and tail excitedly and said, "Brother Yu, carry me up." "Damn you." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes a few times. He raised his hand to wipe away the water droplets that the little guy's tail had splashed onto his face. This Styx River black carp, which was originally rather cute in appearance, was now completely unreasonable in his eyes. "Brother Yu, don't hesitate. You can do it. I believe that you're the best," Xiao Yuan said with certainty. Although his words were simple, this kind of pure encouragement coming from the mouth of a little kid was quite effective against a black-hearted person like Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu scratched his face embarrassedly and asked tentatively, "Why don't we give it a try? But let me say the ugly words first. Failure is certain. Don't blame it on me when the time comes." This was definitely his style. He would always give a warning first. "Yes. As long as brother Yu tries his best, it's fine." Xiao Yuan cheered and threw herself into Yu Qianqiu's arms without a care for the cost. Yu Qianqiu had no choice but to hug him. After a moment of hesitation, he moved step by step toward the uneven and swaying light. It was as if there was a bottomless abyss in front of him. When he reached the front, he stopped again and said with some difficulty, "Xiao Yuan, why don't you try jumping first? If it doesn't work, I'll try again." When these words were spoken, it was unknown how many people looked at him with disdain. Either you don't go or you don't even have the courage to go through the motions. Who do you think you are? Even Sangyun Xin felt that it would be embarrassing to be with him in the future. "Big brother Yu, this won't do. If I fall into the water when I try, it will be considered a failure according to the ancestral teachings. I can't try again," Xiao Yuan said very seriously. "Hee. Then forget it." Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly. He held the big carp in one hand and reached out a finger. He raised his cultivation to the limit and slowly reached into the colored glazed light. He was going to test the waters first. The result surprised him. The temperature in the light was indeed very high, and the pressure was not small, but it was completely within his tolerance range. He inserted his finger into the light repeatedly, then changed to a palm, then to a fist. Finally, he stuck his entire arm in and shook it a few times. With this action, he did not care how many people were looking at him with disdain. His life was his, and how could he be compared to those who were just watching the show? After finally confirming that there were no problems, he directly dashed in with Xiao Yuan in his arms. Amidst Xiao Yuan's cheers, he raised his arms high and lifted Xiao Yuan above his head. He slowly flew up against the pressure. He had no pressure now. In any case, he had already tried. If he found that something was wrong, he could just go into the water and admit defeat. There was no need to risk his life. However, what he did not know was that the moment he charged in and the light enveloped his body, a golden light immediately erupted from his dantian, as if it had been activated by something. However, it only flashed for a moment before the golden light disappeared. The big carp he held above his head was covered in a faint layer of golden leaf. He was in the light, so he felt that there was a glistening yellow in front of him. It was as if he was wearing tinted glasses, so he did not notice anything. Instead, the expressions of the people outside all became solemn. They looked at Xiao Yuan in surprise. They could clearly see that, just a moment ago, Xiao Yuan's body had been covered in a faint layer of golden hair. At this moment, the yellow light around Xiao Yuan's body was clearly stronger than its surroundings, like a thin halo of light protecting him. How could this be? The silver-armored soldier in the air said in surprise. The scholar's gaze instantly sharpened as he stared at Xiao Yuan, as if he wanted to cut him open and examine him. Everyone had an expression of disbelief on their faces, especially the members of the Li Palace's water tribe, who did not even dare to breathe loudly. Li Guang and his wife had very complicated expressions. Although everyone had seen this strange phenomenon until the very end, no one could be sure what effect this strange phenomenon would have, or whether some miracle would really occur. Xiao Yuan, do you feel any discomfort? If you do, tell me immediately. Remember, it's fine if you fail. As long as you try your best, you won't have any regrets. Don't try to be brave. Yu Qianqiu raised Xiao Yuan up bit by bit. This unscrupulous fellow said all sorts of nice words and all sorts of reasons, as if he was doing it for his own good. But he had Xiao Yuan act as the vanguard, because the previous example had made it clear that the higher they went, the more dangerous it would be. He was determined not to take the slightest risk for such an unreliable matter. Xiao Yuan clearly knew that the higher they went, the more dangerous it would be. His two carp eyes nervously stared up and he said, "Brother Yu, I understand. But for now, I don't seem to feel any discomfort. Brother Yu, do you feel anything?" "I don't feel anything right now either. Let's take it slow, there's no rush." Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly. He lowered his head to look at his feet. It was only 5 or 6 meters and he thought that if there was more pressure he would have to go up a little more. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the speed at which the two of them ascended was truly unsightly. Occasionally they would stop and ask each other if there was any discomfort. They were truly very careful. Chapter 1009. The two slowly ascended like this, attracting everyone's gaze. After a while, quite a few people realized that their eyes were a little tired from watching these two leap over the Dragon Gate. They wanted nothing more than to urge them to hurry up. If they could do it, then they could do it. If they couldn't, then they couldn't. Stop dawdling here. At first, the Li Palace Water Tribe members were very nervous, but after watching for a while they got used to it. They could only look at each other speechlessly, as if they had never heard of someone leaping over the Dragon Gate like this. The tense bodies of the surrounding people gradually relaxed, and some even seemed bored to death. Who knew how long it would take to see the final result of these two? Why do I feel like this action is a little like the Statue of Liberty? A woman raises one arm, a man raises both arms, it's probably like this. Yu Qianqiu also felt that his actions were rather slow, and he even had time to let his imagination run wild. Looking around at the listless crowd, he couldn't help but sigh. It was better to just stand on the side and watch. Unlike him, who was in danger and was so nervous. Next time he wouldn't randomly show his love. Looking at his feet, he realized that they were already more than 10 meters from the surface of the underworld river. Yu Qianqiu solemnly raised his head and asked, "Little Yuan, how do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "Oh, I'm fine, but I feel like I'm going a little slow." Little Yuan stared at him with his carp eyes and said honestly. The nervousness that could be seen in his eyes before was now beginning to wander around leisurely. "It's good to go a little slower, we're not in a hurry. It's better to be safe than sorry. Safety first," Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. Little Yuan very obediently gave an "oh," and the two clowns continued to slowly ascend. Hearing these words, some distant tyrant of the water tribe, probably someone with a fiery temper, couldn't bear to watch any longer and roared, Yu Qianqiu, are you still a man? If you're a man, then be a little braver and go straight up. If you can do it, then you can do it. If you can't, then forget it. The voice reverberated across the surface of the underworld river. Oh, oh, don't just stand there and talk. Yu Qianqiu raised his hands in surrender and quickly looked around and cursed. Fuck. You're a man. You're brave. If you're capable, come at me. Let's swap. I also know how to make sarcastic remarks. I guarantee that I will urge you to hurry up. If you die in an accident, I will take care of your corpse and choose a good place to bury you. Haha. The group of waterkind warriors who had been watching the show burst into laughter. The person who roared seemed to be amused and scolded with a smile. Bullshit. I want to see how you will die. I have already chosen a good place. It is at the foot of the dragon transformation sect. I am waiting to collect your corpse. Everyone. Li Guang floated into the air and cupped his hands towards the crowd. Today is an important day for my Li Palace's water tribe. I hope that everyone can give me some face. This matter concerns my son's life. Please do not disturb him. As soon as he said that, the laughter gradually calmed down. Even if he did not give face to Li Guang, he still had to give face to the Pegasus that came from nowhere, 20 meters from the water. Yu Qianqiu looked down. He remembered that when the first Nether River black carp leapt through the dragon gate, it seemed to feel the pressure when it rose 20 meters and slowed down. He immediately raised his head and asked, Little Yuan, how do you feel? Little Yuan's carp eyes turned around and carefully sensed. After a pause he said, Nothing much, it's still the same. Still the same? Yu Qianqiu muttered. He felt that something was wrong and warned again, Little Yuan, I am preparing to increase my speed. If you feel anything wrong, tell me immediately. Brother Yu, I understand. Little Yuan replied excitedly. Truly, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. Yu Qianqiu sighed inwardly and immediately tried to increase his speed. 1 meter, 2 meters, he could only watch as the distance between him and the surface of the Nether River increased. When he rose to around 50 meters, he did not need to ask Little Yuan. He himself felt that something was wrong. At such a height, even with Little Yuan supporting him, he should have felt the pressure increase. Why was it still the same as before, with no reaction at all? Suspicious, he could not help but stop and carefully think about what was going on. In the eyes of the crowd, they initially thought that the two of them had already felt the pressure and could no longer continue, but looking at Yu Qianqiu's expression and behavior, it did not seem like it was difficult for them to continue. Little Yuan saw that they had risen so much and Yu Qianqiu had stopped and immediately shouted excitedly, Brother Yu, I'm fine. I can go a little faster. It seemed that they were really fine. Yu Qianqiu could not figure out what had gone wrong, so he made up his mind and gritted his teeth. Following Little Yuan's words, he pushed Little Yuan up the mountain step by step at a normal walking speed. 60 meters from the surface of the Nether River. 80 meters. Everyone's eyes were fixed on them. The speed at which the two of them rose at a leisurely and relaxed pace was unbelievable. Li Guang and his wife looked at each other. There was not a trace of happiness on their faces, but astonishment instead. The crown princes and princesses of the Li Palace were also dumbfounded. However, at this time, Yu Qianqiu suddenly understood what the problem was. He believed that the carp leaping over the dragon gate was a task that could only be completed by the carp alone. Relying on the help of others was ineffective, or in other words, it was ineffective if humans intervened. In other words, Little Yuan was probably happy for nothing. So that was the case. Once Yu Qianqiu figured it out, he immediately felt no psychological burden. Maintaining a certain level of vigilance, he pushed Little Yuan and directly flew up. 20 meters. 10 meters, Brother Yu is almost there. Little Yuan was already cheering in advance. Yu Qianqiu also took the opportunity to put him down and hold him in his arms, their figures stabilizing in the air. At this time, the two of them had already reached the same height as the top of the mountain. Directly in front of them was the carriage of the Pegasus, emitting a rich and simple aura. Two transparent precious horses were staring at them with their crystal-like eyes, their bodies shining brightly like statues standing at the top of the mountain. Everyone was staring at them without blinking. There were no cheers, and no applause. They were quietly waiting for what would happen next. Although the speed at which the two of them ascended was a little too slow, it was too easy. They couldn't help but ask themselves if this counted as leaping over the dragon gate. After being in a stalemate with the carriage of the Pegasus at the top of the mountain for a while, Little Yuan leisurely whispered into Yu Qianqiu's ear, "Should we go over?" Yu Qianqiu was also somewhat at a loss. He didn't know what to do next. He looked at the surface of the nether river beneath his feet, then at the top of the mountain. He thought that before they reached the top of the mountain, they might not have succeeded in leaping over the dragon gate. He then pushed little Yuan, who was in his arms, forward, and the two of them slowly floated to the top of the mountain. Everyone watched as Yu Qianqiu carefully placed his feet on the top of the mountain. At this time little Yuan had also transformed back into his human form and shyly was placed on the top of the mountain by Yu Qianqiu. Just as little Yuan's feet touched the ground, the two Pegasus simultaneously straightened their forebodies and stomped their hooves, letting out a long neigh that resounded through the entire night sky for a long time. Just as the long neigh stopped, the glazed light that enveloped the dragon gate slowly retreated like flowing water, finally condensing into a resplendent ball of light on the carriage of the Pegasus. The condensed glazed light wriggled for a while, and suddenly, a huge head gradually rose from the glazed light, ferocious horns, a protruding forehead, a sharp nose, huge eyes, and a long mouth filled with dense fangs. Damn it, dragon! This was not the first time that Yu Qianqiu had seen such a thing, and he immediately recognized that it was a dragon head. However, he did not expect to see it for the second time, and at such a close distance at that. Just as he was about to slowly retreat and get ready to leave as soon as he realized something was wrong, he suddenly felt something touch his thigh. Wah! Wah! A loud and a small cry sounded on the mountain peak. Yu Qianqiu and little Yuan dodged at the same time. When the former saw that it was little Yuan, he immediately slapped his chest and scolded, "Why are you sneaking behind me? Are you trying to scare me to death?" Little Yuan did not care so much and flashed behind him again, grabbing onto his clothes and poking his head out from behind. Looking at the ferocious head, he said carefully, "Little Yuan is scared." He was rather honest, and what he meant was to borrow his back to hide. Everyone was looking at the wondrous sight on the peak of the mountain in shock. They were also startled by the two people's shouts. They thought that something had happened to the two of them, so when they heard the two of them, they immediately looked at them with disdain. Even the scholar and silver armor army who were hiding in the dark, could not help but look at each other. The scholar did not know whether to laugh or cry, and he muttered, "What a pair of clowns." After being frightened, Yu Qianqiu was more or less immune to it. He gathered his courage to take a closer look at the dragon head, and immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He discovered that it was only a lifelike shape formed by the glazed light, and was slightly transparent. It was not real at all. He immediately patted little Yuan's head and said, don't be afraid, I'm here." "Brother Yu, then what were you afraid of?" Little Yuan asked a question that he should not have asked, and in return Yu Qianqiu sneered in disdain, "Tithi, I saw that you were not here and I was afraid that something happened to you." At this moment the dragon head slowly rose from the resplendent ball of light, and the body that it was dragging along also began to appear in the sky, and the dragon claws also appeared one by one. As the dragon rose into the sky, the resplendent ball of light that it had emerged from gradually shrank, until the dragon's tail appeared, and a small ball of light adorned the dragon's tail. At this point, the glazed light covering the Pegasus carriage had completely disappeared, and it had completely condensed into a glistening yellow dragon that was 50 to 60 meters long above the dragon transformation gate. It stood majestically in the night sky, and looked down on the entire netherworld. It was abnormally shocking. Standing on the dragon transformation gate, Yu Qianqiu and little Yuan looked up with their mouths wide open. Everyone's gaze was also focused on the dragon hovering in the sky. Chapter 10:10. Why was it like this? This question could only be answered by those who knew the process of leaping through the dragon gate. It was not hard to find the answer from the increasingly excited expressions of the Li Guang couple. However, no one was paying attention to the two of them. Everyone's gaze was on the dragon in the sky. Boom! A purple thunderbolt suddenly burst forth from the purple halo in the sky and struck the glassy coiling dragon. The coiling dragon was instantly covered in purple lightning, and after a while, it gradually disappeared into the body of the coiling dragon. The lifelike but lifeless glassy coiled dragon suddenly trembled and the scales on its body slightly opened up. A majestic and ancient aura surged out. The huge dragon suddenly raised its head and opened its mouth that was filled with fangs. Roar! Its roar shook the heavens and earth. The surface of the river Styx trembled like a sieve, causing everyone's eardrums to feel slightly numb. After a long roar, the huge dragon's head slightly sat down. Its coiled body was like a spring and fiercely shot into the pitch-black night sky like an arrow released from a bow. A strong gust of wind instantly blew, causing Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the dragon transformation gate, to stagger. Xiao Yuan, on the other hand, tightly hugged onto his thigh. The huge dragon that was brimming with vitality was now completely golden, as if it had just escaped from a cage. It moved like a golden thunderbolt, shaking its head and wagging its tail as it swam freely in the pitch-black night sky. Its aura was astonishing and it was extremely awe-inspiring. The experts hiding in the night sky could no longer hide. Wherever the golden light passed, they all revealed themselves and dodged. Only now did the people below realize that there were so many people hiding in the sky. However, they did not mind as they did not do anything. It was not wrong for them to quietly watch the show from the sky. The flying dragon was in the wild, wandering in all directions. Even the place where the scholar and the silver armor army were hiding was no exception. Seeing the flying dragon charging over, the scholar waved his hand and directly pulled the huge head of the flying dragon to the side. The flying dragon's body wriggled past and had nothing to do with the two of them. The two of them were still hidden in the darkness and did not appear in everyone's sight. After swimming to its heart's content, the flying dragon swung its four limbs and charged toward the surface of the Netherworld River. With the dragon transformation gate as the center, it quickly circled around the dragon transformation gate. Its huge body was extremely nimble and it could be said to be domineering. A huge whirlpool formed under the dragon transformation gate, and one could almost see the bottom of the river Styx. Huge waves rose from the surface of the river Styx and surged in all directions, shocking the people standing on the water and causing them to fly into the sky. The raging waves that surged in all directions reverberated, and once again caused huge waves to surge furiously at the dragon transformation gate. The flying dragon that was circling around the dragon transformation gate quickly passed through the huge waves, directly passing through the empty mountain belly of the dragon transformation gate. Its speed was extremely fast, breaking through the waves and winding around the dragon transformation gate. In the end, it quietly hovered above the dragon transformation gate, slightly nodding as it stared at the two people standing on the mountain peak. It could be said that he was as agile as a rabbit and as quiet as a virgin. The surging movements in all directions began to gradually calm down. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that something was wrong. Before he could even take 2 steps, one of his thighs felt heavy, and he immediately said to Xiao Yuan, who was pulling him back, "Xiao Yuan, quickly let go. I have already helped you. There is nothing else I can help you with now." Xiao Yuan, quickly let go. I am going down. No. I'm scared. Xiao Yuan looked at the ferocious huge dragon in the sky in fear, and did his best to hold back Yu Qianqiu. Damn. Quickly let go. Are you trying to get me killed? Yu Qianqiu almost wanted to beat him up, but the two of them had more or less developed some feelings for each other. He immediately roared at the Li Guang couple below. Old Li Guang, quickly control your son. I have already done you a great favor. You can't be like this. Quickly ask your son to let go. Brother Yu. I'm scared alone. Xiao Yuan immediately wailed. Damn. You were the one who pestered me to send you up. Now that you are here you say you are scared. What have you been doing? Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to push his forehead twice, and seeing that the huge dragon in the sky was already moving, he immediately panicked and said, Quickly let go. It is better for you to be scared alone than both of us. Brother Yu. I'm scared. Xiao Yuan cried and did not let go, and finally seemed to have thought of something. He raised his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu with tears. Brother Yu. I will not transform into a dragon. Bring me down with you. If you want to go down yourself. I am not stopping you. Don't hug me. Yu Qianqiu pushed Xiao Yuan's head and said. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yuan hugged him even tighter and said, My whole body is weak. I can't move. T. You are hugging me with so much strength. Quickly let go. Yu Qianqiu was a little anxious. Xiao Yuan, what nonsense are you saying? Below, Li Guang was angry and shouted, Quickly let go of your brother Yu. Songyun Xin, who had been watching the commotion for a long time, shook his head and sighed. This scum seemed to cause trouble wherever he went, and now he had come to the Netherworld to cause such a big commotion. After today there would probably be no one in the Netherworld who did not know of Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at Li Guang, then looked at Xiao Yuan, who was hugging his leg. He did not care what Li Guang was thinking and immediately glared at Xiao Yuan. You said you wanted to go down. Don't blame me in the future? Not caring whether Xiao Yuan agreed or not, he turned around and hugged Xiao Yuan. But before he could get up, he immediately heard a gust of wind. By the time he got up with Xiao Yuan in his arms, they were already surrounded by a golden haze. The flying dragon was circling around the mountain, its long body already wrapped around the two of them. Everyone stared at this scene in shock, feeling that this Yu Qianqiu was going to be dragged down by the fourth prince of the Li Palace. Suddenly, the circling flying dragon shrank, wrapping around the two of them like a ball of light. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's scream came from inside, "Little Yuan, don't hug me, let go. Fuck up." As soon as Yu Qianqiu cried out, a figure was pulled out of the thick ball of light. If it was not Yu Qianqiu, who else could it be? They saw that he had landed in the empty carriage pulled by the Pegasus, a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He was lying weakly on the seat, his eyes closed, and it was impossible to tell whether he was dead or alive. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know what had happened inside. However, they could imagine that with Xiao Yuan's cultivation, it was impossible for him to do this to Yu Qianqiu. It was most likely the doing of the ball of light formed by the flying dragon. But no one dared to go to the top of the mountain to check if Yu Qianqiu was dead or alive. Many people wanted to use their spiritual sense to check, but they all realized that it was impossible for their spiritual sense to approach the dragon transformation gate. There was a thick qi on the dragon transformation gate that prevented any spiritual sense or perception from peeking inside. Li Guang was also one of the people who wanted to investigate, but when he realized that his spiritual sense and perception could not approach, he clapped his hands in regret and sighed, "My Nether River Black Carp clan owes him." The Empress next to him only glanced at Yu Qianqiu a few more times before staring at the shrinking ball of light. As a mother, she naturally placed her son first. Everything else was secondary. Zhang Yunxin, who witnessed all of this, furrowed his brows. He also released his spiritual sense and perception to check, but to no avail. However, at this moment he really hoped that Yu Qianqiu would die. This was because no matter how unreasonable an immortal emperor was, they could not blame him for such a strange way of dying. This was a good way to die. There was no better way to die than this. Most people's attention was quickly gathered on the shrinking ball of light. To them, a mere Yu Qianqiu's death had nothing to do with them. But when the ball of light gradually shrank into a humanoid shape similar to Xiao Yuan's size, it suddenly exploded with a blinding light. After the blinding light quickly disappeared, a small black dragon that was over 10 meters long floated above the dragon transformation gate with its claws and fangs bared. Roar! It let out a long roar into the endless night sky. The sound was not soft, but it was somewhat desolate and lonely. The water tribe of the Li Palace, with the exception of Li Guang, and the crown prince and princess, all knelt in the direction of the dragon transformation gate, their emotions extremely agitated. Nay. The two transparent steeds pulling the carriage both reared up and neighed as if summoning something. The little black dragon in the air flashed with black light and immediately transformed back into Xiao Yuan's original appearance. It slowly descended to the summit and looked down at the people below as it wept. "Father, mother, big brother, big sister, I have to go." At this moment, his mind had already fused with things that originally did not belong to him. He already knew what he was going to do next. Xiao Yuan. The Empress and her brothers and sisters couldn't help but call out. His mother was especially agitated, and Li Guang tightly hugged her with his lips tightly shut. Xiao Yuan wiped his tears. The two Pegasi had already pulled the carriage to him. He turned and climbed onto the carriage, then straightened up the reclining Yu Qianqiu and sobbed, "Big brother Yu, I'm afraid to go alone. I'll take you with me." At these words, everyone below almost fainted. They all stared up in shock. He was going to take Yu Qianqiu with him? Sangyun Xian's eyebrows once more fiercely twitched. This couldn't be any better. It was unknown whether Yu Qianqiu was dead or alive. If he left in such a bizarre manner, the Immortal Palace would have even less reason to blame him. The two Pegasi did not express any objections, as if it was only right that they take Yu Qianqiu with them. They neighed in unison, stomped their hooves and then flew into the air. They pulled the carriage around the dragon transformation gate and then flew directly toward the spinning violet halo in the sky. He took two of them with him at once? Just as everyone was dumbfounded, the sound of Yu Qianqiu waking up came from the sky. Damn it. It hurts so much. Why am I sitting here? Pegasi? Xiao Yuan, what's the meaning of this? Everyone saw Yu Qianqiu poking his head out from the back of the carriage, looking down with a terrified expression. Then they saw half of Xiao Yuan's body poking out, clearly standing on the seat. They saw him hugging Yu Qianqiu's neck and sobbing, "Xiao Yuan is afraid to go alone. Big brother Yu accompanies Xiao Yuan." Chapter 10-11. Together? Where are we going? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He turned around and sat down. He wasn't in the mood to enjoy sitting on the heavenly horse's carriage. His eyes were fixed on the direction the heavenly horse was flying in. It was the purple halo spinning in the air. He instantly knew where he was going. Brother Yu? Little Yuan won't be able to see father, mother, big brother and big sister in the future. Sob sob. Little Yuan grabbed his arm and cried. Let go of me. Yu Qianqiu said with a sinister expression. He didn't want to go to such a mysterious place that he didn't know anything about even if he was beaten to death. No. Little Yuan tightened his grip and shook his head stubbornly. Yu Qianqiu immediately laughed coldly. Now that things had come to this, how could he still be soft-hearted? Pa. He chopped at the back of little Yuan's neck with his palm, only to discover that a strange force had rebounded from the child's body, causing his palm to go numb. Little Yuan couldn't cry anymore. He looked at him in a daze, not knowing what to do. Yu Qianqiu was also dumbfounded. He looked at little Yuan again and realized that he couldn't see through little Yuan's cultivation. The corner of his mouth twitched. He suddenly took out a hell steel melon hammer and mercilessly smashed it at the back of little Yuan's neck. Little Yuan's teary eyes were filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe that his respectable and adorable brother Yu would actually do such a thing to him. He could only watch helplessly as he fainted in his seat. The people below couldn't see this scene, but some of the experts hidden in the air saw it clearly. They all gritted their teeth. The scholar and the Silver Armor Army also looked at each other speechlessly. Then they saw Yu Qianqiu put away the hell steel melon hammer in his hand. He flipped over and directly flew out of the carriage. He turned into a ray of light and shot towards the river Styx below. Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had returned to Grey Cloud Xian's side. They all looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. Songyun Xian gulped as a look of disappointment flashed across his eyes. He never thought that he would return. There was a rumbling sound in the sky. Everyone stared at the sky and saw a strong light flash. Then the carriage was swallowed by the purple halo. Immediately after, the spinning purple halo suddenly stopped spinning, and once again condensed into a dozen or so purple lightning bolts. It was as if a huge hand had grabbed a bunch of long threads, and fiercely pulled them to the same point in the night sky. The night sky was pitch black and calm. Only the sound of the Netherworld River could be heard. In an instant, everything returned to normal as if nothing had happened. The people in all directions didn't move. They were still in their original positions, reflecting on everything that had just happened. That Pegasus carriage that tore through the sky was enough for everyone to analyze for a while. As for Yu Qianqiu, he felt that he had been the most wronged. He felt that he had been dragged into this matter for no reason at all. Putting aside the fact that there were no benefits, he had even hit someone else's son. Perhaps that person would bear a grudge against him, so he cautiously and vigilantly guarded against all members of the Li Palace's water tribe. Li Guang's face was filled with excitement while the Empress sorrowfully stared in the direction her son had disappeared. The crown princes and princesses all had complicated expressions. Whether it was them or the various powerhouses, none of them could have imagined that the person who had succeeded in leaping through the Dragon Gate would be Li Guang's youngest son, who had not even reached the level of an underworld knight. It truly could be said that karma had long since been decided, and it was beyond anyone's control. Why was it like this? The crowd couldn't help but recall what Yu Qianqiu had said before. He had said that he had seen the fourth prince of the Li Palace glowing with a multicolored light, as if he had been possessed by a dragon. Previously, everyone had believed that Yu Qianqiu was talking nonsense, but everyone had seen the strange phenomenon that had occurred when the fourth prince of the Li Palace had leaped through the Dragon Gate. If Yu Qianqiu was playing tricks, then his acting was a little too good. Especially that scene of him clinging to life and being afraid of death, everyone still remembered it vividly. Based on everyone's experience, they could naturally see that Yu Qianqiu had not been faking it. From this, they could infer that the fourth prince of the Li Palace was destined to leap through the Dragon Gate. And the theory that the black carp of the Underworld River would form good karma with others after leaping through the Dragon Gate had once again been verified. Everyone had no choice but to believe it. In other words, Yu Qianqiu's use of a fishing rod to target the fourth prince of the Li Palace truly had been a misunderstanding. Just as he had said, he had not intended to humiliate the water tribe of the Underworld River. Congratulations to the black carp tribe of the Underworld River. After so many years, a person of great fortune has once again transformed into a black dragon and left the netherworld. This is truly worthy of celebration. An indifferent and unhurried voice suddenly resounded through the night sky. It was not a voice, but it echoed in every direction, causing everyone's minds to shake. Especially that tone of voice. Although it was polite words of congratulations, it gave off a feeling of being high above all living beings. The various experts on the surface of the underworld river trembled and raised their heads to look around. The experts hidden in the darkness in the sky also looked around, all of them trembling in fear. At first, Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it, but after observing the changes in the expressions of Li Guang and the other experts, he was slightly alarmed. He immediately determined that this person who had yet to reveal himself was not ordinary. Li Guang looked around, then respectfully clasped his hands to the air and said, "Li Guang represents the Black Carp tribe of the Underworld River in thanking the Emperor of the Underworld. We did not know that the Emperor of the Underworld would grace us with his presence and did not lead the entire tribe to welcome you. This is truly a sin. Dare I ask, what advice does the Emperor of the Underworld have?" The Emperor of the Underworld? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He did not think that Li Guang would dare address the other party as the Emperor of the Underworld when he did not know who the other party was. He did not expect it to be the Emperor of the Underworld who had severely wounded his teacher in 3 moves, the legendary Supreme Master of the Underworld, the Emperor of the Underworld, who had come in person. Oh my! In his shock, he quickly glanced around but he could not detect where the target was. He immediately looked at Songyun Xan and found that Songyun Xan also had a shocked expression. It was obvious that he did not expect the Emperor of the Underworld to come in person. "It's not advice, but I should congratulate you. Farewell." As soon as the indifferent voice fell, 2 white flowing lights appeared in a dark corner in the sky, disappearing quickly into the horizon. At the same time that the 2 white lights appeared, all the people bowed in the direction of the departing figures with cupped hands, saying, "Farewell, Underworld Emperor." Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xan also followed suit, bowing respectfully to bid farewell. After everyone stood up, congratulatory voices continuously came from all directions towards Li Guang. Li Guang, on the other hand, continuously cupped his fists towards all directions in return. The surrounding water tribe experts all hid into the underworld river and left. Streaks of light also flew past in the sky. In a short while, almost everyone had left, leaving only the people of Li Palace and the people of Hidden Dragon Villa in the distant sky. "Let's go as well." Yu Qianqiu secretly whispered to Songyun Xan and Xinyu. The 3 of them had the same idea. They all felt that this was not a place to stay for long, and that it was better to leave as soon as possible. "Wait!" Li Guang shouted, and the 3 of them paused. What they were worried about had happened and they slowly turned around to look at him. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "Old man Li Guang, no matter what, I played a part in Xiao Yuan's transformation into a dragon. Do you still want to hold on to other things and not let go? What did you play a part in?" Crown Prince Li Zhong snorted coldly and said, "You said it before, my 4th brother's body had a faint glow as if he was possessed by a dragon. This means that my 4th brother is destined to leap over the dragon gate. Unless what you said before was a lie, and you used a fishing rod to insult the water race of the underworld river." Even without him saying it, Yu Qianqiu himself felt a little puzzled. Saying that there was a strange phenomenon on Xiao Yuan's body was originally nonsense. When he carried Xiao Yuan to leap over the dragon gate, he realized that there was no resistance and thought that it would be ineffective. Who knew that Xiao Yuan would succeed so easily and successfully transform into a dragon? What a joke. He still could not figure out what was going on. Could it be that the legend of forming good karma was true, and that he was the fated person in the legend? But it seemed a little ridiculous. Even so, it did not mean that he could let this so-called crown prince shout at him. He immediately narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly. "Ungrateful and sharp-tongued. I told you long ago that you have no right to speak in front of me." The high temperature of the purple flames hidden within his body suddenly erupted in an earth-shattering manner, instantly enveloping the surface of the Netherworld River. The power of the powerful purple flames was not child's play, not to mention that the high temperature was focused on Crown Prince Li Zhong. In that instant, Crown Prince Li Zhong felt as if he had fallen into an endless purgatory. His body was burning both inside and out, and he felt like he was about to be burned to ashes. Immediately, a transparent black protective aura surged out, intending to block the corrosion of the high temperature. When Yu Qianqiu subdued Xinyu, he had already understood that the extreme yang flames in his body could restrain the cultivators of the underworld. Thinking back to when he was in the human world, he had forced out the remaining power of the black fire many times without revealing it to fight against enemies. Along the way, he had been wondering if he could use the same method to test out the blue fire and purple fire in the netherworld. He did not want to test this move on Li Zhong, but this guy was too tactless. He had no grudges with him, but he had repeatedly contradicted him. You have the support of your parents, who are mid-stage underworld emperors, and I also have a golden fighter, who is a mid-stage immortal emperor, as well as the decree of the immortal world immortal emperor. Why should I be afraid of you? At that moment it was not just Prince Li Zhong who felt it. All of the black carps of the Styx River felt the power that made their hearts palpitate. It was a kind of fate where the sunlight dispelled the haze. All of the water races felt a sense of fear that came from the depths of their souls. They all looked at Yu Qianqiu in fear. Li Guang and his wife stared at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Was this the power of a minor immortal cultivator? Had he been hiding his cultivation all this time? Xinyu was also trembling. He felt something from Yu Qianqiu that made his heart tremble. Cangyun Xen suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu, a shocked expression on his face. Use it well and you will be invincible. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he stared at Li Zhong's black protective aura. He suddenly recalled what his master, Bai Changchun, had said. With a thought, the purple flames that were in a stalemate with Li Zhong's protective aura instantly condensed into an invisible high-energy blade. Chapter 10-12. I wonder how powerful this blade is. Yu Qianqiu thought as he stared coldly at Li Zhong. Everyone around him suddenly felt that the terrifying power had disappeared, and they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Li Zhong, who was hiding in the transparent black protective aura, also let out a sigh of relief. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. The terrifying power just now made him feel a lingering fear, and he no longer had the confidence to fight against Yu Qianqiu. Just as he was thinking about how to get himself out of the situation, a swoosh sound rang out. A hole suddenly appeared on the black protective aura, as effortlessly as cutting a piece of paper. In an instant, a long hole was cut open by something unknown. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth suddenly curved into a cold smile. Sure enough, it was just as he had expected. Ah! Li Zhong screamed, and he was almost scared out of his wits. The protective aura was easily broken, and he didn't even notice how the opponent made the move just now. He desperately urged the protective aura to quickly fuse together. Not to mention him, Li Guang, his wife, and the people of the water race as well as Cangyun Xen were all shocked. Yu Qianqiu sneered and stretched out his palm towards Li Zhong. His 5 fingers spread out like a claw, and the invisible blade suddenly spun like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. The sound of swoosh swoosh was endless, and in an instant, Li Zhong's protective aura was cut into pieces, like a broken eggshell, and immediately collapsed. The invisible blade caused such a big movement, anyone would notice its existence. Li Zhong, who was panic-stricken and at a loss, was about to deal with it, but he saw Yu Qianqiu seize the opportunity. His 5 fingers were like claws and he shouted sternly, "Absorbing Star's great magic." White smoke suddenly erupted from Li Zhong's body. Before the white smoke could disperse, a withered corpse immediately rushed out of the white smoke. With a hoarse and dry voice he shouted, "Father, save me." The speed at which he was escaping was worlds apart from his previous speed. Almost at the same time, the invisible blade had already chased after Li Zhong to kill him. Li Guang was shocked. He had wanted to let his son test out Yu Qianqiu's strength, but he didn't expect that his son didn't even have the time to fight back and was already too late to escape. How could he not be shocked? However, with Li Guang's level of cultivation, the invisible blade had caused quite a commotion. There was nowhere for him to hide. How could he let his son be killed? He teleported and blocked Li Zhong's back. His black imperial robe fluttered even though there was no wind. He did not move at all, but a pillar of water shot out from the Netherworld River like a cannonball. There was a loud bang. Li Guang's attack was no small matter. The invisible blade was instantly hit by the water pillar and could no longer condense into a blade. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation he could no longer control it. In an instant, the intense heat spread in all directions, and the water pillar that shot into the sky was almost completely turned into mist by the high temperature. The mist quickly dispersed, and the entire water region seemed to be in a high-temperature steamer. As soon as the shockwave from the collision spread out, Cangyun Xen, who had seen Li Guang make a move, immediately appeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. With a cold expression, he reached his right hand into his left sleeve and touched the storage bracelet on his wrist. There were 10 spaces in the storage bracelet, and one of them contained 5 swords. Any one of them could be earth-shattering. Li Guang waved his sleeve, and the mist in front of him was immediately dispersed. He immediately saw Grey Cloud Xian's action, and his pupils shrank. He immediately shouted, "We have no enmity with each other, so why must we fight to the death?" Seeing that the other party was not going to fight, Grey Cloud Xian's hand, which was already making a sword-drawing gesture on the storage bracelet, paused. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked out from behind him. He looked at Li Guang and said in a low voice, "Everyone has seen and heard it with their eyes and ears. It's not that we want to fight to the death with you, but that son of yours has repeatedly spoken rudely and has gone too far. It's simply intolerable." "Zhong, how are you?" The Empress, who was supporting Crown Prince Li Zhong, cried out in pain. Everyone looked over and saw that Crown Prince Li Zhong's face was contorted. His entire body had become skin and bones, and he was no different from a dried corpse. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with fear in his eyes, and a hoarse voice came from his shriveled throat. "Mother, move aside. I want to draw water. I'm about to die." The Empress retreated hesitantly. Crown Prince Li Zhong brazenly fell back onto the surface of the river Styx. He floated up and down in the water, and countless tiny bubbles appeared all over his body. It was as if he had opened up all his pores and was drinking water. His withered body, which was like a dried corpse, gradually began to fill up. When he returned to normal, he directly stood on the surface of the water with a splash. He stood beside his mother with a gloomy expression, gritting his teeth and not making a sound. Grey Cloud Xian glanced at Yu Qianqiu. He did not know what evil method he had used to injure someone to such a frightening degree. Yu Qianqiu had a faint smile on his face as he stared at Li Zhong. To him, that attack just now could not be said to be a small harvest. Ever since he had failed to use the Absorbing Star's great art for the first time in the celestial world, he did not dare to use it recklessly. He was afraid that at a critical moment he would go for wool and come home shorn. Now that he was using the two arts of fire and water together, he could use the power of the purple flames to condense an invisible high-energy blade that specialized in shattering the opponent's protective stellar chi. Then he could use the Absorbing Star's great art of the water arts to complement each other. Just the thought of its might made him excited. It did not matter if the opponent had forged an immortal body, a nether body, or a demonic body. As long as they were hit by his Absorbing Star's great art, no matter how powerful their cultivation was, they would not be able to display even 1/10 of their usual strength. At this moment, the invisible and formless high-energy blade had become a formidable killing move that could easily take the opponent's life. What's more, he could completely condense a few more high-energy blades made of purple flames. Using the Guiyuan sword technique to control them, the power would not be something a normal expert could withstand. Seeing that his son was safe and sound, Li Guang let out a sigh of relief. He first glanced at the ever-vigilant Grey Cloud Xin, then stared at Yu Qianqiu and slowly said, "My son was reckless, but he has also been punished. From now on we will go our separate ways and our grudges will be resolved." "How is that?" "I never wanted to have any entanglements with your Li Palace's water tribe," Yu Qianqiu indifferently said. These words undoubtedly approved of the other party's solution. The reason why he was so happy was because he did not know that Xiao Yuan's transformation into a dragon was due to his help. Otherwise, with his personality, how could he be so kind? Even if he did not scrape a sum of money from the Li Palace, he would still make the Li Palace owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. At the same time, because of his previous nonsense, of all the things he could say, he had to say that Xiao Yuan's body was like a roaming dragon, creating a coincidence. Originally, Li Guang still wanted to remember his great favor, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was because of Xiao Yuan himself. Yu Qianqiu did not do anything, so the matter was left unsettled. But then again, if it was not for his nonsense, of course, the scholar who was hiding in the air at that time would not have let him go so easily. He would definitely have captured him and brought him back to be studied. Thus, everything had two sides and no one could say whether it was a blessing or a curse. Li Guang's face was expressionless. He glanced at Sangyun Xin, then flashed to the throne of the one-horned water rhinoceros and shouted, "Return to the palace." With these words there were two cracks of a whip. The Li Palace's water tribe slowly sank into the river Styx, leaving from the bottom of the water. At this time only Yu Qianqiu, Sangyun Xin, and Xinyu remained on the surface of the river Styx. The three of them had come together, but after the storm only the three of them remained. The people of the distant hidden dragon villa all flew over. 100 people floated in the air, looking at the three of them in bewilderment. They had faintly seen Yu Qianqiu help the Li Palace's water tribe successfully transform into a dragon, and then saw Yu Qianqiu turn hostile and attack the Li Palace's water tribe. They could not hear what was being said, so they were confused and could not understand what was going on. Dare I ask Sect Master you what happened just now? Ding Xiang cupped his hands in the air and asked, his tone clearly even more infuriating. *CK. You guys hid far away early in the morning, no matter what happened I can't count on you guys to help. Yu Qianqiu was a little unhappy and casually said, it's already over, it's just a small matter, not worth mentioning. Seeing that he didn't want to say it, Ding Xiang couldn't force him. He looked at the dark road ahead and said with a smile, I don't know if Great Master Tsang and Sect Leader you are going to Twilight City. So, we might as well travel together. At least we can take care of each other. He had made up his mind to find a way to get information from Yu Qianqiu. The Pegasus carriage piercing through the sky, and the Styx black carp leaping through the dragon gate and transforming into a dragon, such important matters. If he could get this information back to the sect, it would definitely be a great merit. So he had to find a way to rely on the two of them. As long as they were together, there was a chance of getting information, otherwise there would be no chance. How could Sangyun Xian and Yu Qianqiu not see such an obvious thing? However, Hidden Dragon Villa was a big sect in the immortal world after all. Sangyun Xian could look down on them, but Yu Qianqiu's World Chamber of Commerce still needed to survive in the immortal world, so there was no need to make another strong enemy. Moreover, it was not a bad thing to have more people who were familiar with the situation. He laughed heartily and said, Elder Ding is right. If we travel together we can look out for each other. Then he looked at Jianghu and said, let's continue our journey. Jianghu still had a lingering fear about what had just happened, so he did not dare to say much. He immediately sank into the water and revealed his original form. Yu Qianqiu and Sangyun Xian landed on the big shell and rode the wind and waves again. Ding Xiang called his fellow sect members and quickly followed. Half a day had passed, and Yu Qianqiu faced the cool wind on the Styx River with his hands behind his back. His eyes flickered as he looked forward, and he did not say a word. This made Sangyun Xian feel a little strange. This was the first time he had seen this fellow open his eyes and speak so honestly. It was truly rare. Little did he know that after Yu Qianqiu understood how to use the purple flame high-energy saber, he began to doubt his previous actions. He had lived 2 lives, and his previous life's experience told him that he had to develop a large force that could ensure his safety. It would be best if everything was under his control, so that he could avoid ending up miserably like in his previous life. However, all this while, he seemed to have neglected one thing, and that was that the world he was in now was not the mortal world of his previous life. In the mortal world, a single person's power was always insignificant, and the foundation to display great power was always a group. In the end, he brought this obsession to this world and spared no effort to develop his own force. However, this world was completely different from his previous life. Demons and ghosts flew in the sky and burrowed into the ground. Even immortals were constantly acting as bystanders. This was completely out of the scope of the mortal world. At the end of the day, the foundation of everything was that his own cultivation had to be strong enough. This was a world where individual ability was ranked before the strength of a group, and he was neglecting the essentials. His understanding of the purple flame high-energy saber made him understand that it was not enough to cultivate just by sitting cross-legged and imagining things. More actual combat often gave more benefits than just thinking. Just like the old man by Changchun had said, if you used it well, you would be invincible. If you did not use it well, how could you use it well? For example, the old man would look for experts to fight when he had nothing to do, and when he lost, he would hide and cultivate. When his abilities improved, he would come out to look for others to fight. His ability grew by leaps and bounds, to the point where he dared to take the initiative to fight the Emperor of the Underworld. Although it was unknown whether the old man was dead or alive, if he came out again, who in the immortal and netherworld would dare to provoke him, except for the top experts? This was the result of fighting. From this, Yu Qianqiu came to a conclusion. It wasn't a long-term solution for him to always hide and pretend to be a grandson. It was good to exercise more. If he used it well, he would be invincible in the world. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.